Chapter 25. After Li Sanlang's visit, Lu Xiaoyi's happy and grounded life finally returned to peace. He finally had the time to search for traces of cultivation in the sea of books. Perhaps the people of this world could not understand his dedication to cultivation, but to the people from his previous world, this was almost everything. Transmigrating without cultivation, the chrysanthemum electric drill. But the limited few days were not enough for him to find anything of value. It was easy to capture a trace of cultivation in these ordinary biographies of mountains, rivers, geography, and people, but it was basically impossible to find the truth from them. All the documents were shrouded in fog, ambiguous and specious. This was not a problem that could be solved by summarizing. After 10 days, Lu Xiaoyi was summoned to the inner courtyard again to be tortured by the two old ladies. I heard that you've been living very comfortably these days. You've been calling your friends all day, enjoying wine and meat. The best restaurants in Poo City have sent you food, haven't they? There are also musicians, acrobatic entertainers, chatting and laughing with the richest man, and drunkards everywhere. Such days are over. Aren't you a little reluctant? Since Xiao Yi likes it, as your mother, I don't want to disturb your mood. Why don't you be grounded for another month? Lu Xiaoyi listened to his mother's sarcastic words and laughed in his heart, but he had to be sincere now. Thus he said in fear and trepidation, "Mother, what are you saying? Your son also wants to reflect on his mistakes and repent, but there's no point in rejecting the kindness of others. As the saying goes, wine and meat pass through the intestines, but remorse stays in the heart. Your son is very clear about your kind intentions, and I'm not deliberately ignoring them." Aunt Kai Huan laughed. "Xiao Yi, your mouth is getting better and better at talking." Lu Xiaoyi said with a straight face, "There's a time when a person is born, and there's a time when a person is born. The heavens create people equally. I didn't speak much when I was young, but now I've made up for it. Some people talk a lot when they're young, but when they grow up, silence is golden. It's the same principle." Lu Yaosher put on a straight face. "Xiao Yi, you've grown up. It's not good for me to meddle in your affairs. But what's up with that Li Sanlang? I've never heard of you hooking up with him." Lu Xiaoyi laughed. "Mother, what are you saying? How is this hooking up? It's like this." He told her about Li Sanlang's performance and reaction at the spring outing. "Li Sanju and I have a common enemy, and his son helped him vent his anger. That's why he gave me a toast to thank me. Actually, this is the first time we've spoken. His son felt that there was no need to persist in some unnecessary conflicts. The Li family had quite a bit of influence in Poo City. They were the real local tyrants. It would be good to ease the relationship between the two families a little. Li Sanlang is a smart man. His purpose for coming to our Lu province is not pure. That is why I took the initiative to receive him. In my opinion, even if the conflict from back then is not easy to resolve, just the fact that I am close to him in this generation is enough to ease some things." Lu Yaosher sighed. As the matriarch of Lu province, how could she not know that the current Sima residence was no longer as glorious? It was not suitable for them to have any conflicts with a local tyrant like the Li family. However, there were some things that could not be regretted and were hard to turn around. A few days ago, her son's brick had coincidentally brought Li Sanlang over. It was an unexpected surprise. Seeing his mother sigh, Lu Xiaoyi guessed her thoughts. "Mother, this is an inevitable choice between families. He's in the business world, and I'm in the government. There is no direct conflict of interest. It's best for us to coexist. As for Li Sanlang, a shrewd person like him is not so easy to make friends. He's different from Qi Er and his gang. Your son understands this. He won't easily fall into the trap of others. In the end, we're just using each other." Lu Yaosher stared at her son. At this moment, she was certain. It was as if overnight, that ignorant child had truly grown up. He had his own thoughts and his own judgment. Her heart, which had been in suspense for 18 years, could finally be at ease. Her son had grown up. She had to care less about the outside world. After all, this residence belonged to the Lu family. "I don't care about what you do outside. But now that Xiao Yi is so understanding, then tell me, when do you plan to give me an explanation for that literary examination?" This time, it was Lu Xiaoyi's turn to sigh. He knew that he could not avoid this matter that concerned the reputation of his family in Lu province. When he first came to this body, he did not take it seriously at all. Who would transmigrate for no reason? Why would he go to another world to continue his exam-oriented education? Would he be looking for trouble for himself? But now, he no longer thought that way. Because of the relationship he had cultivated with the two old women, he knew that in the future, he would definitely do many things that would exceed the expectations of the two old women. It would also be very difficult to satisfy the wishes of the two old women, such as getting married and having children. He could not disappoint the two old women in all aspects. In that case, he shouldn't reject the relatively easy title of a scholar. There are still 3 months before the summer's imperial examinations. The two old ladies need not worry. Xiao Yi will obtain this title this year as a present for Mother's 50th birthday. Lu Yaoshi broke into a smile. Really? Lu Xiaoyi gritted his teeth. Really? Lu Yaoshi confirmed again. If you obtain scholarly honors, I will not force you to get married for 3 years. It is also up to you to choose. But if you do not succeed, the day you fail will be the day you get married. This old woman, every step she took, she was really watertight. Mother, getting married is not like recruiting servants. How can it be so fast? Aunt Kai Huan stepped in at the right time. You don't have to worry about this. Leave everything to your Aunt Kai. I promise not to be perfunctory. Lu Xiaoyi retreated in defeat. He was confident that he could pass the Wenzhuan exam because his original consciousness had been reading books for more than 10 years and had a deep accumulation of knowledge. The Wenzhuan exam was just the most basic level in this world, just like the ancient scholars in his previous life. There were still several levels above that. Wen Yuan, Wen Dian, and Wen Kuei. His mother's request was that he must complete the literary examination to prove his identity as a scholarly family in Lu province. As for the next level, if he passed the literary examination, he could be an official. This was not what the old madam wanted. It sounded easy and it was easy to think about, but to do it, Lu Xiaoyi was still a responsible person. Since he wanted to take the imperial examinations, he had to make preparations in advance. Originally, his consciousness was very resistant to taking the examinations, so he did not make any preparations. However, he was different. As someone who had experienced it before, he knew very well that the expectations of the elders were for the younger generation. The younger generation would always start to regret not doing more things to make them happy when their parents were still alive. He would not. At the very least, he would try his best to do what he could. Although he had never experienced such an occasion in his previous life, there were still many books about the general examination in the Lu residence. The whole process was very clear. When he roughly looked through the selected articles over the years and the articles he had written in the past 2 years, he found 2 problems after comparing them one by one. The good news was that with his current level, he could definitely pass this kind of preliminary examination. The bad news was that his current consciousness could no longer write the essays that his original consciousness had written. He forgot that he was no longer the original him. Chapter 26. To write an article, one needed inspiration and soul. His current soul was the soul of his previous life. If he were to write, he was afraid that what he would write would be the charm of a web novel, which was completely incompatible with the values of this world. Therefore, if he were to write an article that was in line with the knowledge of this world, there might be no problem with the structure of the words, wording, and tone, but it would lack something that could be expressed in words. Even a mere essay would be a difficult task for the current him. It might take him several years to truly understand this world, and only then would he be able to write something that barely had a soul. He did not have years of time to boast in front of his mother for 3 months. His character was that of a poor loser who cared about his reputation. This was the first problem that this lazy soul of his encountered in this world that needed to be solved urgently. With his character and style, if he could not walk the right path, then he could only walk the wrong path. A few days later, the 7 heroes held a welcoming dinner for Lu Xiaoyi at Chaofeng Brothel. It was very lively because of the scene. Their group was far from being considered evil in Pu City, let alone the local underworld forces. They were just a group of rich kids who were unrestrained and willful when they were young. During the dinner, Li Sanlang came unexpectedly, which made Lu Xiaoyi very suspicious of his purpose. As the son of the richest man, there was no need for him to fawn so much in front of an outdated aristocrat. However, he did not say anything. Qi Er and his group did not have any grudges or friendship with Li San, but under Li San's influence, the atmosphere was obviously more harmonious. As expected, Li San performed his ridiculous flame ability in front of everyone again. To others, it was just a novelty, but to Qi Er and his group, it was a kindred spirit, so the atmosphere was even more lively. As they drank to their heart's content, Qi Er said mysteriously, "Brothers, I know a place to go. It's a secret palace that might contain spiritual items. It's not far from Pu City. How about it? Are you interested in going with me to explore it?" Wang Taizhu, Fatty Qian, and the others immediately responded. They were in a state where they could neither go up nor down. There was no way for them to go up, but they were unwilling to go down. They were very conflicted. If they did not progress after this period of time, they would lose their confidence and probably end up like Li San, turning their abilities into a little trick to make friends with others. But the secret palace was an opportunity. The most popular legend in the history of cultivation in the kingdom of the Evernight was that if one obtained a treasure from the secret palace, he or she would be reborn and become an immortal. It was very tempting for half-baked cultivators like them who had nowhere else to go. It was a good opportunity to test their luck. Ordinary people like them, who had not really integrated into cultivation, had not fully understood the importance of resources in cultivation and the nature of life and death. Therefore, they would still share the news with their friends, which was inconceivable among real cultivators. If there was a secret mansion, of course, they had to explore it by themselves. How could they find a group of friends to rush in together? Who would be the one to claim the opportunity? It wasn't like they were going on a field trip. Lu Xiaoyi and Li San were the only two people in the group who did not think much of it. Li San was an experienced person, so he knew that these were all ephemeral and illusory things. On the other hand, Lu Xiaoyi was more rational than impulsive. How could a group of ordinary people obtain such a great opportunity through the inheritance of the secret palace? This kind of thing was written in biographies to deceive people. It was better to listen to it and not to take it seriously. However, both of them were sophisticated people and knew that this was not the time to pour cold water on them. Therefore, they just smiled and waited for Qi Er and his gang to make up their minds. They only needed to agree and treat it as an outing, which would not take much time. Qi Er was mysterious and refused to say the specific location. He only said that it was within half a day's journey on horseback outside Pu City. It seemed that he still had the basic vigilance of a cultivator. However, the reason why Qi Er was the leader of the 7 heroes was that he had a generous temperament. This could be seen from his willingness to share the jade tablet with his brothers. In the end, while they were drunk, everyone agreed to set off the day after tomorrow. They agreed on a time and place to meet up, and then they left. Lu Xiaoyi slept. When he turned around and thought about the agreement at the House of Morning Flower, he felt that something was wrong. After thinking about it, he finally realized that the agreement at that time was empty and did not involve anything practical. Empty did not mean that everyone would go back on their words. In this world, at this age, if you did not attend to the agreement, you would be criticized behind your back. Therefore, no one would find excuses to avoid it. However, the problem was that they did not talk about the preparation work for the exploration at all. They were not real cultivators and did not have the ability to travel high and low. They also did not have treasures like the space storage bag. Everything had to be carried by people and horses, but no one mentioned what they needed to prepare. As a soul from his previous life, he had never eaten pork, but he had seen pigs run. He had never experienced donkey trekking. However, with the development of information, he roughly knew what was going on. Was an exploration a leisurely walk in the spring? With his limited knowledge, at the very least, he needed to prepare a lot of necessary things like tents, ropes, raincoats, fire seeds, various tools, self-defense weapons, water, food, and other complicated things. Qi Er and his gang did not mention a single word about these. Were they very experienced? Not necessarily. From the time they were drinking and chatting, they knew that this exploration would be their first time in their lives, including Lee San Lang. Most of them treated this treasure hunt as a relaxing trip that was similar to an outing. This was due to the fact that they lived like princes. On the other hand, it was because biographies and rumors often described the fruitful results, but did not mention the dangers involved. Most importantly, the public security around Pooh City was very good, and it was rare to hear about the existence of bandits and robbers. However, Lu Xiaoyi did not think so. He was not worried about the appearance of strong people. Pooh City was indeed very good in this aspect. Moreover, it seemed that other than him, the others in their group were all cultivators. He was worried about the so-called secret residence. If it was fake, then it did not matter. At most, they would have made a wasted trip. However, if it was real, how could it not have all kinds of traps and prohibitions? Even the tombs of wealthy families had all kinds of measures to prevent tomb robbers. How could the secret residence of a cultivator not have any? It was unimaginable. However, it was obviously too late to inform them. Moreover, with these fellows' temperaments, they might not listen to him. In Pooh City, they were a group of people that no one dared to offend. They were arrogant and looked down on everyone. If he had the time to waste his breath, he might as well prepare some for himself. He did not look for Ping or the other servants in the residence, because looking for them would mean telling the old madam. He looked for the shopkeeper of a grocery store and gave him some advice. The shopkeeper immediately understood. After being in this business for so many years, he knew what this young master wanted to do. It was nothing more than having nothing better to do and wanted to go out to find some excitement. To him, this was nothing new. After some bustling, he gathered some goods from other stores. Lu Xiaoyi checked them one by one and found that not only were the quality good, the variety of goods prepared was more abundant than he expected. Of course, the price was not low either. He did not bring these things back to the residence. Instead, he left them in the grocery store and would come back to pick them up the next morning. Otherwise, he would not be able to hide this large pile of goods from his mother's informant, Ping's pair of poisonous eyes. Chapter 27. The next morning, at dawn, a group of youths began to gather at the north gate of Pooh City. The city gates of the Sunshine Kingdom would be closed at night and would only be opened in the morning. This was the rule. However, the Sunshine Kingdom had been peaceful for a long time, and such a rule had long existed in name only. The commoners at the bottom might not be able to feel it, but the soldiers guarding the city would not offend these rich kids. Even in the middle of the night, as long as you could report where you came from, you would still be able to pass through unimpeded. There were 8 people and 8 horses. The soldiers hurriedly opened the gate. Li San, Qi Er, and the others were all public figures in Pooh City, and very few people did not know them. Looking at their age and attire, they were all young masters of big families. Who would dare to offend them? Thus, they made a racket and swarmed out. Lu Xiaoyi secretly observed them. There were 2 things that surprised him. One was Lee San Lang. He did not really hear him agree when they were drinking the day before yesterday. He thought that he had already lost interest in cultivation. Since he was 2 or 3 years older than everyone else, he would be more mature and would not participate in this kind of pure youth nonsense. He did not expect him to follow them. He had a feeling that Li San's target was him, since he had invited him to drink in Lu Province. Although he had concealed it very well, it could not escape his intuition of 2 lifetimes. Lu Xiaoyi was very curious. What exactly did he have that made the son of the richest man deliberately befriend him? Was it deliberate malice? Or did he have other motives? Another strange thing was that everyone's bags were full. Lu Xiaoyi thought that he had made sufficient preparations for the adventure, but who knew that everyone's bags were bigger than his. It seemed that the natives of this world were still naturally experienced in this kind of exploration. He was thinking too much. No one brought any servants. This was agreed upon beforehand. Firstly, it was to prove their bravery. Secondly, it was to prevent their families from stopping them. If their families knew about this kind of youth swim, they would not stop it. After leaving the house, they first ran along the main road to the north. After about 10 miles, they turned into a small road in the northwest direction. After another 10 miles, Even the small road disappeared. The land also lost its green vitality and began to gradually become barren. Sand dunes began to appear and became denser. Lu Xiaoyi's heart sank. He already roughly knew which area Qi was bringing them to. Although he had never left Pu City ever since he transmigrated, and although his original self rarely left Pu City's walls, these were not a big problem for a person who loved to read. In the annals of Pu City, the mountains, rivers, lakes, swamps, and towns of various sizes within several hundred miles of Pu City were clearly marked. This was not a land that humans had just reclaimed, but a home that had been inhabited for thousands of years. Every area around Pu City had its own unique features. The most unique one was the northwestern area. That was because there was a huge Gobi Desert there. It was so big that it could even encompass the entire area around Pu City. Qi said that it was only half a day's journey away from the secret place, which meant that this place was only at the edge of the vast Gobi Desert. If they really went deeper, without a guide or a camel, their fate would only be a narrow escape. Perhaps in other people's hearts, only a place like this could possibly contain a mysterious opportunity. At least, that was what Qi and his gang thought. That was why they maintained their excitement, and even became more and more excited. Under such emotions, Lu Xiaoyi and Li Samlang slowly fell to the back. It was not that their horses were not good enough, but that they were not excited enough. What do you think? Li Samlang roared. In a rolling yellow sand, there was no way to communicate without roaring. Lu Xiaoyi roared back. What the hell am I looking at? Please don't talk and fill my mouth with sand. This kind of galloping stopped twice, for no other reason than to feed the horses water and add food. Although they were all foppish sons of rich families, in this world where horses were the main means of transportation, they did not need anyone to teach them how to take care of horses and how to run long distances. Half a day later, Qi, who was in the lead, stopped. There was some confusion in his eyes. It seems to be this place. Let me look at the map again. Qi jumped off his horse and climbed up a slightly taller sand dune. Looking at the map in his hand, he began to look around. They were already dozens of miles into the Gobi Desert. There was basically no obvious green in sight. The sand dunes all looked the same. The only difference was their size. In any case, Lu Xiaoyi could not tell the difference. However, he was still very clear about the direction they came from. If they walked another dozens of miles in, he was afraid that he would not be able to differentiate between north, south, east, and west. Qi, do you need someone to help you look at the map? Are you sure you can read all the words on the map? Li Sen asked loudly. Second brother, are you sure you're the only one who has this map, and not the people of Pu City who have a copy? Lu Xiaoyi also teased from the side. The others laughed heartlessly. This was the way young people got along. On the sand dune, Qi gestured with his fingers and mumbled. Among the group, he had followed his father's generation to go on business trips the most. Even Li San could not compare to him in this aspect, so everyone still had a lot of confidence in him. After a while, Qi rolled down the sand dune. This was also the most time-saving way to go down the sand dune. Only experienced desert tribesmen knew this. Obviously, this was Qi's return to the two provocateurs. He was telling them that in the Gobi Desert, Qi, was the most experienced. Found it. Follow that dry riverbed. We'll reach it after walking for another dozen miles. But now, we need to eat something to replenish our strength. The group found a shady place and began to prepare to eat. This time, Lu Xiaoyi finally knew what was in this group of people's bags. Wine, meat, fruits, cushions, parasols, and even silver plates and jade cups. In short, it was a complete set for a picnic. No one treated this exploration as a dangerous operation. In their eyes, it was a novel excavation, just like stealing melons from an orchard in the suburbs. It was as if this was the right thing to do. Lu Xiaoyi wondered if he had read too many books in his previous life and thought too much of cultivators. But this was not the case at all. This was not a simple meal, but a carnival in the Gobi Desert. To the young people who lacked the tempering of adversity, at least they had obtained happiness, no matter what the outcome was. Among them, Lu Xiaoyi only ate the food of others and not his own. This was because there were only two kinds of food in his bag, water and flatbread. Moreover, it was the kind that was made of dead noodles. He could not even chew it with his bad teeth. This was food for coolies. If he took it out now, he would be laughed at by his companions. If he could not use it in the end, he could just throw it away. If he could use it, it would be a life-saving item. No one cared about this little bit of food. After eating and drinking to their fill, they saw that it was almost noon. The group packed up and moved forward along that dry riverbed. This was a riverbed formed over time. If Chi'er had not mentioned it, Lu Xiaoyi would not have been able to tell apart from the occasional gravel under his feet. Horses were already at their limit. If they went deeper, they would have to change to camels. Fortunately, the place they were looking for soon appeared in front of them. Chapter 28. What appeared in front of them was a nearly vertical earth cliff. It was several hundred feet long and several hundred feet high. Due to the erosion of sand and the passage of time, it was hard to tell whether this earth cliff was made of earth or sand. This kind of earth cliff was still very common in this area because they had not yet gone deep into the Gobi Desert. When they really went deep, they would not be able to find anything other than sand. The peculiar thing about this earth cliff was that there were hundreds of caves of various sizes on its hanging walls. Although they had been eroded by the wind and sand for many years, it was obvious that this was not the work of nature, but rather a clear sign of human activity. This was a man-made cave sculpture group. In the caves of different sizes, one could faintly see the statues of legendary gods and Buddhas. However, many of them were half hidden in the sand that was everywhere in the Gobi Desert. The outlines of the upper layers could still be seen, but the lower layers were almost completely filled by the wind and sand and had become part of the cliff, leaving only their shapes. It was a bit like the Mogeo cave in his previous life, but it was simpler and smaller in scale. Moreover, it did not have any color. He did not know if it was not colored in the beginning or if the color had long been taken away by the wind and sand. Are there any earth tribes around here? Lu Xiaoyi was worried and asked. Chi'er's answer was very straightforward. No, there is no one within 30 miles. The limited number of indigenous people in the Gobi Desert will live in oases. No one can survive in a place like this. Little E, I know what you mean. Don't worry, this is an ownerless land and not the graveyard of an earth tribe. It has a longer history than the earth tribe, so there is nothing to worry about. Everyone gathered in front of the cave wall group and pointed. Although they were all born and bred in Pooh City, they had never been to this place. In their short lives, the destinations of their excursions were mostly in the other areas of Pooh City with abundant water and grass. Chi'er took out his mysterious map again, but this time he looked at it very quickly and pointed at it with his finger. This cave group is roughly divided into 5 layers. As shown in the map, the secret is in the 3rd cave on the left of the 4th layer. Everyone looked over. The 4th floor was actually the 2nd highest floor. The 3rd cave wasn't that big. Among the hundreds of caves in the earth cliff, it was one of the smaller ones. Looking at it from the outside, there was nothing special about it. Fatty Qian shouted. The 3rd cave on the 4th floor? Second brother, are you telling the truth? How can I fit into such a small hole? Could there be a mistake? I think those big holes are good. If I want to hide something, I will hide it in those big holes. Chi'er scolded. It's not like we're rearing pigs. Why do we need space? Everyone, let's see how we can go up. I reckon that it's not very possible to climb up from the bottom. Firstly, there's no ladder. Secondly, this cliff is exposed to the wind and the sun. It doesn't look very sturdy. There's also no way to chisel nails and pull ropes. This wasn't a difficult problem to solve. Since it wasn't easy to go up from the bottom, they might as well go up from the top. They would first climb to the top of the earth cliff, then use the rope to drop down. Lu Xiaoyi secretly observed. He had already begun to think of retreating. According to the theory from his previous life, the greatest danger was the danger that came unknowingly. When you didn't fully realize it, it would come so gently, making you feel that it was within your control and that you could do it with a little more effort. When the danger revealed its fangs, you would realize that everything was irreversible. The earth cliff was more than 10 feet high, and the height of the 4th floor was also about 10 feet. If they fell from such a height, even if it was soft sand below, they would basically be crippled even if they didn't die. Moreover, the most uncertain thing about the so-called Earth Cliff was its bearing capacity. If it was a stone cliff, even if it was higher, they would still have confidence because they knew that at least the bottom of their feet was solid. The biggest characteristic of a teenager's action was that they followed the crowd. If there was a certain amount of danger, if the first teenager dared to go up and try, then the other teenagers would definitely follow closely. No matter how timid they were, no matter how much they resisted in their hearts, they would never say no. For a teenager at this age, face was more important than the sky. No one wanted to become the object of ridicule when their future companions gathered together. This was also the reason why there were always children who fell from trees and drowned in small ponds. Their age meant that they would never understand that admitting that they were timid wasn't a shameful thing. They didn't understand, but Lu Xiaoyi understood. The only thing he was considering now was whether to say it now or climb to the top of the cliff. It was a bit too early to say it now. The teenagers had been running for nearly 100 miles in half a day, and when they reached this place, they would look up and then retreat when they felt that they couldn't climb up. How was that possible? Fatty Qian helped him make the decision. This hot-tempered teenager took the lead and jumped off the horse to find a way to climb up. Then, Iron Pillar and Monkey Sun followed closely behind, unwilling to be outdone. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. The situation was getting out of hand. He suspected that even if he raised a different opinion, he might not be able to stop this group of teenagers who seemed to have seen their favorite toys. Qi'er was still considered mature. He wasn't in a hurry to climb up. Instead, he looked at the remaining few. Let's first tie up the horses and find a shady place. Don't let the horses be scared away when we come back. There's no way to walk these 100 miles back. We have to pay special attention to the Scorpion Cave. It'll be troublesome if this thing stings the horses. Do we need to leave someone to watch over them? Lu Xiaoyi asked. Since he couldn't stop this group of impulsive guys, at least he could stay outside. If something really happened, whether it was to rescue them or to return to report, there would always be a backup plan. Qi'er shook his head. There's no need. Our brothers are all here. Who would stay here to watch the horses and let others get the opportunity? We have to go up and try our luck, especially you, Littly. You haven't started cultivating yet. If there's a good opportunity, we've all discussed it. You go first. Moreover, this place is spacious. If we climb to the top of the cliff, we'll have a panoramic view of everything within dozens of miles. It's impossible for anyone to get close to steal the horses. We only need to sprinkle some realgar to guard against the sand snakes and scorpions. The second key to walking towards danger was that there would always be someone who was sincerely thinking for you. You would be moved by this and then forget about the danger. Just like now, everyone had a tacit understanding that if there really was an opportunity, they would help Lu Xiaoyi, who hadn't started cultivating yet. Such brotherly love made one feel touched and helpless. Rationality and impulsiveness could never coexist. The few of them found a shady place to tie up the horses. Then, they carefully sprinkled 2 layers of realgar powder around the horses. To be honest, Lu Xiaoyi didn't bring realgar powder with him when he was preparing for the journey. There was still a gap between the consciousness in one's mind and real experience. Even if most of these guys' bags were filled with wine and meat, there were still some useful things, especially the leader, Qi'er. A burst of joyful laughter came from the cliff. It turned out that Fatty Qian, who was running in the first place, had slipped and ended up falling down the cliff. The path up the cliff was a slope. The sand was soft to begin with, and the fatty's flesh was also soft. After rolling all the way down, nothing happened to him. However, he was so angry that he shouted and scolded Iron Pillar Monkey for not pulling him back. Therefore, he exerted all his strength and continued climbing up. Monkey laughed and scolded from above. Pull you back? Can you pull me back? At that time, it won't be one person rolling, but 2 people rolling. I'm not as fat as you. I'm afraid I won't be able to come back up if I go down. Chapter 29. The sand was very soft, making the adventure full of joy. Even if they fell, they would at most break their arms and legs. This was the origin of everyone's confidence. However, were soft things always safe? We need ropes, at least 2. Chisels, if we can't find a fixed base on top, we have to dig one into the ground. Shovels, hand hoes, sandproof lanterns. Chier was very experienced. Lu Xiaoyi realized that his worries were really unnecessary in front of the natives of this world. He was not the only one with a brain. No one was more stupid than the other. After Chier finished his instructions, Lu Xiaoyi asked weakly, "Don't we need to bring food and water? If we can't finish in a short time after going in." Chier laughed. "How big do you think this secret abode is? The Earthcliff Cave is only so small. If there's really something inside, I'm afraid the space is very limited. All of us may not be able to squeeze in. Xiaoyi, it's good to be careful, but that depends on the situation. Those space transformations in the biographies are just gimmicks to coax children. To be able to enter our secret abode, I'm afraid it's left behind by the most junior Qi cultivators. Their abilities are limited, and perhaps their opportunities are also limited." This guy was really an understanding person. Li San Lang asked from the side, "How do you know that this place is left behind by cultivators at the level of Qi cultivators at most? Could it be that it's marked on the map?" Chier was embarrassed. "It's a long story. I won't explain. In short, don't ask for too much. Opportunities that are too heaven-defying may not be a blessing for us." Chier's words made Lu Xiaoyi let down his guard. It turned out that Chier was very clear about the exploration he had initiated. Instead of saying that it was a search for opportunities, it was better to say that it was an adventure game that the youngsters liked the most. It was a little whimsical, a little risky, and a little novel. The key was the process. As for whether they could get anything out of it, probably not many would care. Lu Xiaoyi smiled bitterly. His soul still could not completely integrate into the youngster's way of thinking. It was a very simple thing, but he took it so seriously. Chier and the others were organizing their tools. Obviously, they didn't expect the young master of Lu province to be of any help in this regard. Lu Xiaoyi shook his head, carried his huge bag, and began to climb up the cliff following the path that Fatty Qian and the others took. Climbing a mountain with dozens of kilograms of weight on his back was hard work, especially when there was still soft sand under his feet. Fortunately, he had not stopped exercising his body in the past few months. Even so, he still had to use all 4 of his limbs. After climbing for dozens of steps, his inner and outer clothes were soaked with sweat. There was another person beside him. It was Li Sanlang. He was also carrying his own baggage, but it was much smaller than Lu Xiaoyi's. However, his physical fitness was not very good. The long-term influence of alcohol and meat had made him lose the physical strength of a young man in his 20s. One step at a time. Fortunately, the height of the earth cliff was limited. At a height of more than 10 zhong, he was able to persevere. When he climbed to the top of the earth cliff, he didn't feel a trace of cool wind. Instead, because there was no shelter around, the sun shone even more fiercely. However, just as Chier said, the view here was excellent. They could see everything within dozens of miles, so it was impossible for anyone to steal a horse. Chier had the temperament of a leader. "Everyone, prepare a leather bag of water in case you need it when you go down." Fatty Qian said with a calm face, "Second brother, I came up in a hurry and didn't bring anything. Do you think someone can give me a bag?" Chier was not polite at all. "Go down and get it yourself. Who told you to rush in front? You didn't bring any tools, and you still want someone to give you a water bag?" Fatty Qian pulled a long face. "We've already climbed twice. It'll be the 3rd time if we climb again." Beside him, Monkey said, "I'll go down. I didn't bring a water bag either, so I brought Fatty's up as well. Who else is short of water?" The few who came up later all brought things neatly, while Taizhu, who came up first, was the safest. Ever since they entered the Gobi Desert, the 2 large water bags never left his belt. He was a smart person and knew what was most important in such a Gobi Desert. Monkey went down to get water, while the rest of the people began to look for a place where they could hold on to a fixed rope. They needed to fall from here before they could enter the cave. Perhaps it was because of the angle, looking down from the top of the earth cliff. The cave wasn't considered small. However, everyone still unanimously agreed to explore the situation inside the cave first and see if it could accommodate 8 people at the same time. It was easy to choose. Chi-Air must go, and the other must be Monkey because he was the most flexible. As for Lu Xiaoyi, no one considered him. After all, his identity was a little special and was not the same as the disciples of the Shang clan. Lu Xiaoyi heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the rope. Although the youths were rash, they weren't stupid. They had prepared 2 long ropes, and in Lu Xiaoyi's opinion, they were longer, thicker, and of better quality than the one he had prepared. This rope was probably enough to hang all 8 of them up. It seemed like the common goods from the grocery store couldn't compare to the custom-made items for adventurers. One of the long ropes was tied to an old withered tree root, while the other was made with 2 stakes as backup. In terms of safety awareness, it even had the demeanor of a rock climber from his previous life. This made Lu Xiaoyi feel even more at ease. He wasn't worried about man-made disasters, but about heavenly might. With such meticulous preparations, nothing major would happen, right? When Monkey came up, the 2 of them began to prepare the tools. Of course, there was also the so-called flying sword that they never left their hands. Then, Chi-Air went down first, followed by Monkey. To fall from the top of the cliff, the distance needed to climb was less than 20 feet. For 18 or 19-year-old youths who were passionate about cultivation and had strong bodies, it was a very simple matter. As Monkey's body was light, he could even slide down with one hand and even let go of it. He only used the twisting force of his legs to control his body. In Lu Xiaoyi's eyes, this was a very dangerous action, but for these people, it was very easy. After a while, Monkey's exclamation could be heard from below. Hearing this, the people above became anxious. Then there were cheers. "Hey, there's a big hole here. It's dark below, and I don't know how deep it is. We're rich." Monkey's surprised voice could be heard, making Fatty so angry that he scolded. "You damn monkey, you just had to scare me." Chi-Air's voice could be heard from below. "The space below is big enough. Come down one by one. Remember to bring the ropes tied to the stakes down together with the stakes. They can be used below. Little Lee will go first, then third brother Lee, Fatty Qian, Madame Feng, youngest Han, and Iron Pillar will finish up." Lu Xiaoyi pouted. He wanted to say something, but he held back. This was the difference between one person exploring a secret and 8 people exploring a secret, especially when the other 7 people were taking care of you. He couldn't say to leave one person above. Who should he leave? No one came here to watch the horses and guard the ropes. If he stayed, he would be treating Chi-Air and the others' good intentions as ill intent. He didn't know how to appreciate favors. However, third brotherly stood up at this time. He was indeed a shrewd person. Whether he really didn't care, was worried about the risks, or was purely selfless, he stood up and spoke. "Second brother, I won't go down. I'll stay here to watch the horses and guard the ropes. Maybe I can even collect your corpse after you die. Remember, if there are any benefits below, leave a share for your third brother." These were the words of a sly old fox, which made people feel comfortable listening to them. How could Chi-Air not know that it was best to leave one person above? However, this kind of task couldn't be done by force. Thus, he replied, "Don't worry, third brother. Even if I, Chi-Air, don't get anything, there will definitely be something for you. Third brotherly, if we dig out a female zombie, no one wants it. Just leave it for your third brother to be his wife." Chapter 30. Amidst everyone's laughter, Lu Xiaoyi fell with his huge bag on his back. The bag was a little heavy, making it harder for him to fall than the others. Fortunately, he was young, and it was only a short distance of 20 feet. Just as he approached the cave, before he could adjust his posture, he was hugged by someone and heard Chi-Air's voice. "Let go, I've got you." Lu Xiaoyi was dragged into the cave by Chi-Air, but this was only for him. The others had to come in by themselves. Fortunately, they were all cultivators, so this bit of trouble was not a problem for them. Looking around, Chi-Air was right. This cave did not look big from the outside, but when they really entered, they realized that it was quite deep. It was a few feet deep, enough for them to squeeze in. Youngest Han carried a rope that he untied, and Taiju, who was the last to come down, carried 2 piles on his back. Soon, the 7 heroes gathered in the cave. Although they could stand apart, it was still a little crowded, so they could only stand in the depth of the cave. In the depths of the cave, there was a 3-foot square hole that looked like the mouth of a monster. It was so dark that it was a little scary. They did not know how deep it was, nor did they know what was waiting for them inside. Monkey was still gesturing excitedly. I was clearing the sand from the inside. As I shoveled, this place collapsed, revealing such a huge hole. Thankfully, second brother was fast enough to pull me back. If not, I would have been the first to fall in and be the first to obtain the opportunity. Maybe the master below saw that I had a good physique and took me in as his last disciple. Fatty Chien gave him a slap. Or maybe there's a monster below that has been starving for thousands of years, and it just happened to drop a snack like you. Although you don't have much meat, you can at least fill the gaps between its teeth. Lu Xiaoyi did not interrupt. In terms of experience, even though he was a soul of 2 lives, he did not have much experience in digging graves. Moreover, Qi Er was very experienced, and Taiju was very steady. The only suggestion he could give was to go back to their own homes and find their own mothers. However, under the current situation, it was obviously not suitable. With that black hole, everyone's heart was very hot. Have you tried? How deep is this cave? Taiju asked. Chi'er already had a plan in mind. I've tested it with a piece of soil. I can hear the echo, so it shouldn't be too deep. I estimate that it's only about 30 meters deep, the same height as this cliff. Take out a lantern and shine it at the entrance of the cave. The 2 of them held up the lantern and shone it down into the hole. Unfortunately, this was not a searchlight. The oil lantern did not gather light and could not illuminate too far. It was still dark down there, and they could not see clearly. Take a rope and a lantern and go down. Firstly, we can see what's down there. Secondly, we can check the air inside. Lu Xiaoyi, who was at the side, was very impressed when he heard that. Just talking about the way he did things, this Qi Er was very good. There was a sense of calmness in his boldness. Even he, a soul of 2 lifetimes, did not consider the problem of whether the space below could breathe. Soon, a wind lantern was tied to one end of the rope. Fearing that it wasn't heavy enough, a shovel was tied to the end of the rope as well. Fearing that the entrance of the cave would not be sturdy, only Qi Er and Taiju did this at the entrance of the cave. They even lay on the ground to increase their contact area. Fatty Chien and youngest Han hugged their feet tightly from behind. The others stood near the depth of the cave and were closer to the outside. Fatty Chien hugged his feet and did not stop. Second brother, we're a rich family after all. Can't we wash our feet once a day? Change our socks once? It's not a troublesome thing. Second brother, hurry up. If you delay any longer, let's not talk about what's down there. If I just hug your feet, I'll definitely faint from the smell. Behind him, Monkey advised, if you want to faint, do it early. You will make a difference. Second brother, fart and let Fatty enjoy it more. Of course, Chi'er knew what kind of people his brothers were. He ignored them and only focused on the situation inside the cave. After 15 minutes, he put away the lantern. Judging from the length of the rope, the height inside the cave should be the same as the height outside. Our judgment is that this earth cliff is man-made. It's just that it's divided into 2 layers. You've seen the outside, but we don't know what's inside. Taiju also said the cave, actually it should be called a mezzanine. There's something floating on the inner wall, but the lantern can't reach far. There's also some distance between our position and the cave wall. Therefore, it could be the same as the wooden clay figurines outside, or it could be something else. Everyone's breathing became heavy. Taiju still did not say it clearly, but everyone knew what he was hinting at. For example, it was an earth-shattering secret manual or something. Qi Er continued. When the lantern entered, the flame didn't change. This means that there's no problem with the air in the mezzanine. In addition, there's no sign of living creatures inside. In such an enclosed place, there's no water or food. Even the plant roots that the sand snakes and scorpions rely on to survive. There shouldn't be any monsters living inside. Moreover, We really didn't hear any movement. The cave is spacious, and we didn't find anything valuable. However, the lantern's illumination is extremely limited, less than 10%. Therefore, it's hard to say whether there's anything else inside. After the two of them explained, Fatty Chin couldn't help but ask, "Then what are we waiting for? Let's go in quickly." Chi and Taiju exchanged glances. They both realized that they should leave someone behind to guard this place, no matter what. The cave was narrow and difficult to climb up, so they needed help from above. However, it was difficult to decide which of the 7 of them to leave behind. This was not entirely a question of what they could obtain, but a question of satisfying their companion's curiosity that was already filling their chests. The two of them thought of the same person at the same time. After a while, Li Sanlang climbed down from the top of the cliff. After hearing Chi-Er's request, he readily agreed. This made Chi-Er very confused. Since when did Li Sanlang, the son of the richest man, become so easy to talk to? The plan was set. Seeing that the sun was already past noon, they had to hurry up. If they returned late, everyone would have to go home to eat. After arranging the order, Chi-Er and Taiju went down one by one, followed by Old 7, Lu Xiaoi. This was also to take care of him. If there were any abnormalities below, he would be protected by the most people. No matter what, Lu Xiaoi was the only one who didn't cultivate. His combat strength was the weakest, and there might not be any bricks below for him to hit. In order to lower the rope, they had to first make a stake. Everyone picked 2 places that looked the most solid. Madame Fong placed the stake while Fatty Chien swung the hammer. Not long after, a stake was made. Chi-Er began to fasten the rope on it. Fatty Chien was abnormally excited. He lifted the hammer and began to swing the second stake. This was a necessary protective measure. Accidents could easily happen with just one stake, even if this special iron stake had a barbed structure at the bottom. The first strike, everything was normal. The second strike, the ground shook abnormally. Sand fell from the cave walls. Chi-Er was frightened and shouted, "Fatty, stop! Don't smash anymore!" How could there be time? Fatty Chien's strength was not to be underestimated. He swung the hammer excitedly, one strike after another like a windmill. When he heard Chi-Er shout, the third strike had just fallen. How could he stop something that weighed more than 10 kilograms falling down? His heart panicked, and he only deviated the hammer. It didn't hit the stake, but directly hit the ground. With a loud bang, dust flew everywhere, and everyone disappeared without a trace. Chapter 31. Lu Xiaoi's premonition finally happened in a way that he didn't expect at all. Even though he had considered a lot of details, he found that he was no different from his other panic companions. Even if he had lived 10 lives as a human, it would be useless in this situation. The first thing was to scream. There were 8 screams in total. During the falling process, cultivators were no different from ordinary people. They couldn't fly. The second thing was to curl up. This was an instinctive reaction during the falling process. At least they couldn't fall and break their necks among the 8 screams. Fatty Chien's was the most earth-shattering. Madame Feng's was the most shrill and high-pitched. Li Sanlang's was the most unwilling. And Lu Xiaoi's was the strangest, because people here didn't talk like that. F***CK, what does this mean? There's no grass here. It was pitch black all around. He didn't dare to open his eyes because it was full of sand and dust. Lu Xiaoi felt that he had bumped into something twice. He didn't know if it was someone else or the falling soil. He felt like he was a ball, bouncing and being kicked around by a huge force. But this was a kind of luck. It meant that he didn't fall straight to the ground, so the impact was much lighter. The most important thing was that he had been carrying a bag that weighed dozens of kilograms. The 8 thick flatbread inside gave him a valuable cushioning force. He wasn't stupid. He knew that after falling to the ground, he had to roll to reduce the impact. Although he didn't roll to the standard, carrying dozens of kilograms of weight was also not standard. He rolled and crawled as far away as possible from the falling sand and dirt. Then he curled himself into a ball and received the first sand bath in his life. After 15 minutes, the sand above his head no longer fell. Although the smoke and dust had not completely disappeared, Lu Xiaoi knew that he couldn't wait any longer. This was the most critical moment of life rescue. Any delay could mean the end of his life. At this moment, in the collapse of the soil, he went from panic and helplessness to calmness. He calmed down and made a calm judgment, truly reflecting the maturity of a soul that had lived 2 lives. He was not buried too deeply. Thankfully, this was not a collapse of a building, and there were no large objects. It was just sand and soil that would break at the slightest touch. This meant that no one would be crushed to death, but there was a high possibility that someone would be buried alive. The sand was not even up to his waist. Lu Xiaoyi tried his best to pull himself out of the sand. He did not shout, because in the darkness, any meaningless shout would only worsen the panic. He tested his hands, feet, waist, and legs. Were all his breathing parts still there? There wasn't any internal pain either, just some scratches on the skin. He didn't have time to take care of himself. Although he couldn't see his own fingers, he could at least touch the bag on his back. He opened the bag. Because of the violent impact, the things inside were slightly deformed. Hopefully it was still useful. In his bag, there were mostly soft objects such as ropes, flatbread, water bags, medicinal herbs, and clean cotton cloth for wrapping wounds. But what he was looking for now was a hard object, a small wind lantern that could kill people with anger. This was his first choice. To humans, in this kind of situation, there was nothing more important than light that could bring them hope and calm. While he was anxiously searching, his hand was scratched. He realized that it was a fragment of the wind lantern's cover that had been crushed. But it didn't matter. This was a small matter. He touched the slightly deformed and damaged wind lantern and placed it in front of him. Then he took out 2 of the best flint from the base of the wind lantern and found the position of the oil core. Pa! The first strike was still a little shaky, but the second and third strikes were much more stable. Finally, an inch-tall orange-yellow light lit up. In this almost enclosed space that was as dark as ink, what lit up was not only light, but also hope for life. Just as the light was lit up, a voice came from not far away. "I'm here, help me." Lu Xiaoyi held the wind lantern and followed the voice. Because the voice was hoarse, he could not recognize who it was. Only when the wind lantern shone over did he know that it was Qi Er. The sand was almost buried up to his chest. If he was not rescued for a long time, he would die of shortness of breath. It was probably because his hand was injured that he did not have the strength to save himself. Lu Xiaoyi placed the wind lantern in front of him and started to dig with his bare hands. He did not bring a sand shovel in his bag, so he could only use his hands. Luckily, the sand was soft. If not, even if he broke his hands, he would not be able to save anyone. Just as he was digging with all his might, the fatty's voice came from another direction. "Granddad Deity, come and save me. If Granddad Fatty survives this, I will treat you to pork knuckles every day." He even knew how to use pork knuckles to bribe a deity, and it was not a big deal. Lu Xiaoyi shouted, "Granddad Deity, I will remember this. Hold on for a while longer. After I am done with second brother, I will go and find you." The fatty laughed. "So it is little E. You want to pretend to be Granddad Fatty? I don't have pork knuckles, but I can give you chicken claws as much as you want." With Lu Xiaoyi's help, Qi Er came out very quickly. The main reason was that he was badly shaken from the collision and was pressed down by the sand. He was weak all over. Lu Xiaoyi had only dug up to his waist, and he was already able to move by himself. After helping him out, Lu Xiaoyi did not stop. "Second brother, take a rest first. I will go and dig Fatty out." Fatty Qian was buried on his stomach. Actually, he was not buried very deeply. He was just a little out of breath. This guy was lucky. Just like Lu Xiaoyi, other than a few external injuries, he was fine. Qi Er finally recovered and found a sand shovel from somewhere. With the 2 of them working together, the rescue was much faster. While searching, they dug out Tai Zhu, Monkey, and Old Han. However, Madame Feng and Li Samlang were nowhere to be seen. Both Tai Zhu and Old Han were seriously injured. Monkey's legs were broken, and he could not move. Qi Er's eyes were red. He did not care about his injured hands and desperately dug out every suspicious protrusion. He shouted as he dug. Fatty Qian was the same. He was not in the mood to joke anymore. In front of life, everything seemed so heavy. Their biggest obstacle was that their vision was limited and they could not see far. A mere wind lantern was not enough to find the abnormalities in every corner. However, no one gave up. To Lu Xiaoyi, this was an obligation to his friends. To Chi'er, this was to redeem the guilt in his heart. He was the one who brought them here. He did not dare to imagine the storm he would face if he returned with one less person. They dug out another wind lantern. It was barely usable and made the search more organized. Chi'er was on the left, and Lu Xiaoyi was on the right. Fatty Qian was sandwiched in the middle. The three of them began to search, not letting go of even the slightest trace of clues. Not only were they searching for people, but they were also looking for objects, especially water sacks. This was the key to their survival. Water sacks were not afraid of being hit, but they were afraid of being cut by sharp objects. Therefore, as long as they could find it, there was a chance that it would be intact. Chapter 32. The search and rescue was carried out in silence. Other than not letting go of any abnormalities under their feet, there was no other better way. In this dark space, they didn't know where they were or where they were. Lu Xiaoyi let the light sweep across the uneven sand under his feet. He couldn't tell if there was someone buried in the sand. When he passed by a sand dune, he noticed a black shadow. He didn't pay much attention to it before, because in such a dark space, the poor wind lantern would cast shadows everywhere. But this time his heart skipped a beat, and he reached out his hand to touch it. It was a strand of hair. "Fatty, come here." Lu Xiaoyi didn't dare to use the shovel for fear of hurting the person buried in the sand. Fortunately, the layer of sand that buried the person was very thin. After brushing away the sand, he realized that it was Li Sanlang. His heartbeat was almost non-existent. Lu Xiaoyi, Chi'er, and Fatty dug him out as fast as they could. Chi'er, who was always calm, was on the verge of breaking down. Fatty's eyes were dull and helpless. However, Lu Xiaoyi didn't lose his cool. He knew that there was still a chance of survival for such a suffocating person. Li San's hand was still warm, which meant that his heart hadn't stopped beating for long. Therefore, in front of Chi'er and Fatty's dumbfounded eyes, he straddled Li San's body, folded his hands, and began to press Li San's chest rhythmically. He had done first aid training by chance in his previous life. Although he wasn't professional, it was still effective. He shouted to Fatty, mouth to mouth, pass air to him. This was the good thing about Fatty. Although he was talkative, he didn't say much at critical moments. He could barely understand the meaning of passing air, but he didn't know if it would be useful in this situation. But as long as there was a glimmer of hope, he didn't mind doing his best. Fatty Qian stuck out his big belly and pumped air into Li San's mouth with all his might. He was very dedicated to his job and even used his fat tongue to open Li San's mouth, fearing that Li San's tightly shut teeth would block the air from entering. This was also a tough job. There were a few times when Fatty almost couldn't hold on, but when he saw the thin and weak Lu Xiaoyi endlessly pressing on Li San's chest, he couldn't help but stop. Lu Xiaoyi hadn't given up in the fight for the Grim Reaper, and neither would he, Fatty Qian. Just as Chi'er, who was at the side, was about to cry out for them to stop, a violent cough was heard. Lu Xiaoyi's legs went limp, but Fatty Qian was full of energy in a moment of surprise. He held Li San's mouth and continued to kiss and kiss until Li Sanlang blocked him with his hands and feet awkwardly. Lu Xiaoyi panted, "Fatty, that's enough. If you continue to transfer air, you'll choke her to death again." Chi'er's eyes lit up. "Little E, you know medicine?" Lu Xiaoyi smiled bitterly. "How would I know? It's just that when I was young, I saw a wandering Taoist priest use this method to save a drowning child. It's because the child had no heartbeat that I used it in a hurry. It's third brotherly who is lucky, not my medical skills." Chi'er wanted to continue searching, but Lu Xiaoyi pulled him back. "Second brother, I understand how you feel, but now isn't the time for all three of us to look for Madame Foam. Don't forget that there are still 3 seriously injured people. There's no point in saving one over here. I have a lot of medicine in my bag, all for external injuries. You're experienced, so apply it on them. Don't lose too much blood. Leave the search to me and Fatty." There's one thing you have to be clear about. We might not be able to get out for the time being. So before help arrives, I'm afraid we'll have to stay here for a few more days. So, it's very important to save the injured. Chier didn't argue. After saving Li Sanlang, he finally recovered his original calmness because the sudden change had completely disrupted his state of mind. As the initiator, leader, and main person in charge of this expedition, the huge pressure caused him to fall into confusion and fear at the beginning of the rescue. No matter how experienced he was only a 19-year-old youth, a rookie who had never experienced life and death. Now, he knew what he had to do. From a boy to a man, it only took a moment for a certain unexpected event to happen. 2 hours later, when Lu Xiaoyi and Fatty Qian carried Madame Feng's body over, he just rubbed his eyes and continued to apply medicine to Tai Zhu and the other two's wounds. Lu Xiaoyi was exhausted, not only physically but also mentally. He didn't dare to think about how to explain to the two madams when he returned. It was almost inevitable that he would be grounded again because what he was involved in shouldn't be something that a young master of the Sima Manor should be involved in. Lying on a sand dune, he blew out the wind lamp. Because he didn't know how long he would have to stay in this place, he wanted to save as much as he could and just keep the lamp for treating injuries. A figure slowly crawled over. It was Li Sanlang. "Little Li, thank you for saving my life. Fatty Qian already told me that your third brother isn't someone who only knows how to talk. If you have any requests in the future, just tell me. What your third brother has, you will also have. What your third brother doesn't have, you will still have." Lu Xiaoyi smiled and stared at him. "I don't have any requests. I just have one question. Third brother, what is your purpose for being so close to my Lu province these days?" Li Sanlang was stunned. This scholar was really amazing. He couldn't hide anything from him. In this accident, it was all thanks to him that everyone was saved. Such a person was truly worthy of being a young master of the Sima family. The father was a hero, and the son wasn't a coward. "Hee, I really can't say this, but it's not a bad thing. When we return, you will naturally know when you have time to come to Mali Manor. It's really not a bad thing, believe me." After resting for a while, Lu Xiaoyi began to help Chier take care of the injured. It wasn't too complicated. There was a limited amount of medicine, and they were all medicine he brought for external injuries. He couldn't do anything about internal injuries. This was something no one could do about. The only thing they could do was to stop the bleeding of the three heavily injured. Because it was dark enough, and because they had been tense all this time, they had unknowingly forgotten about fainting at the sight of blood. Among the three heavily injured, Tai Zhu's injury was the most serious. It was a head injury, and he had been unconscious the whole time. Youngest Han's internal organs were injured, and he couldn't move, but he was still conscious. Monkey's injuries were slightly lighter, but both his legs were broken. They were tied up with ropes and shovels. No one knew if the bones were right or if he would be disabled in the future. The few who could move gathered around the injured. Chier opened his mouth. This time, Chier, was the one who initiated the exploration. The responsibility lies with me, so there's no need to say more. Fatty Qian started to clamor. "Everyone has a part to play. Second brother, why do you have to put all the blame on yourself?" Chier was unmoved. "Don't pester endlessly. Chier, can't be said to be indomitable, but in front of Madame Feng's spirit, I can't shirk responsibility. If it's mine, it's mine. If it's not mine, I won't take responsibility. Also, I want to say that everyone is still alive today, and we should thank one person. It's Xiaoyi. It's him who was the first to light up the wind lantern and dig me out. Then he dug out Fatty. Then you all were saved. Among them, he snatched third brotherly back from the Grim Reaper. I hope you all remember this." Chapter 33. Chier continued. The medicine was carried by Little E. The food was also carried by Little E. Most of the clear water was carried by him. If we can see each other again, I hope all of you will remember it. Chier's voice turned clear. Clearly, he had walked out of his daze. We collected 11 bags of clear water. Iron Pillar, Youngest Han, and Monkey are not limited to serious injuries. The daily limit for minor injuries is more. We have to think for a longer period of time and persevere until help arrives. As for food, we only have the 8 pancakes that little E carried. It's still the same principle. Serious injuries are not limited. As long as you can eat, eat. Minor injuries are limited. Those who are not injured, hold on for now. Someone had a different opinion. It was Monkey. Second brother, I just broke my leg. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just a minor injury. In the darkness, no one could see that Chi-Er was crying. He couldn't go on like this. These good brothers, even though they usually ate, drank, and played together, their families always said that they were all fair-weather friends who couldn't be relied on at critical moments. But now, he could pat his chest and say that they were not just fair-weather friends, but also life-and-death brothers. Lu Xiaoyi took over the topic at the right time. He could not let the atmosphere become too heavy. There were still a few days to endure. Spirit was very important. An optimistic spirit and a pessimistic spirit were 2 different things. They could determine a person's life and death. I was indeed the one who carried the things, because little E is most afraid of death. However, it won't be easy for us to die because our family's elders might still want to drag us back and give us a good beating. Therefore, for at least half a year, we can forget about Chow Fong brothel and Wan Shun brothel. Everyone, prepare to live a simple life. Everyone chuckled, even if it was a bitter laugh. I just looked around. We can't climb up this place ourselves. I can't do it, and neither can you half-baked cultivators. It's too dark up there, and there's sand everywhere. It's hard to tell where is firm and where is loose. If it causes a second collapse, everyone can write their last words. For example, second brother Chi's wife will remarry. Fatty's fiancé will finally be free from her nightmare, and third brother's beautiful concubines will be able to openly find their gigolos. Laughter and curses came from all around. Lu Xiaoyi's words had a strange power that could make people forget their troubles, especially at a time like this. It was very precious. Only then did Chi-Er realize that he was actually not suitable to be the boss. Unfortunately, he realized it too late, and the 7 heroes were never reunited. We can only wait for help. That's not shameful. I'm guessing that all the families in Pooh City will find out that we're missing during dinner. Second brother Chi and Fatty Chin's families will be better, because you guys have always been dissolute. I don't know about third brother Li's family situation, so they might think that he went to some brothel to fool around. Li Sanlang scolded, "What a venomous little E. I don't usually go to places like that. I still have more land to farm." Lu Xiaoyi ignored him. But Lu Province is different. If they don't know where I'm fooling around, my mother won't be able to eat. So, there will definitely be servants everywhere looking for you. Thanks to me, your families will soon find out that everyone is missing. Then, one of their trusted servants will be beaten up and have no choice but to tell the truth. Coupled with the testimony of the soldiers guarding the north gate, they will have a clear idea of where we went. Lu Xiaoyi told them all this so that they would have the courage to persevere. This was very important. Confidence could stimulate a person's vitality, and it could also put an end to the evil thoughts that some people had when they were at the end of their rope. No one should boast about how brave or selfless they were. When humans were at their final juncture, there were actually some crazy thoughts that even they couldn't think of. This wasn't doubting anyone, but Lu Xiaoyi himself. So he wasn't just saying this for everyone to hear, but also for himself. It won't be just the guards from the various prefectures that will be mobilized. Master Li will definitely invite the prefectural Yaman's cavalry. For this, he might personally pay a visit to the prefectural magistrate and give him some small gifts. Everyone laughed knowingly. Not only that, but there will also be the most experienced head constable from the arresting office, a native guide from Pooh City who is most familiar with the Gobi Desert, and a hunting dog with the best sense of smell. Trust me, the prefectural magistrate will do their best, even more so than the search for great bandits and criminals. Because these people won't pay tribute to the prefectural magistrate, but your elders will. There are no risks, only benefits. Trust me, the Pooh City bureaucracy will be the most efficient in this search and rescue operation. 8 people and 8 horses. There will be countless people on the main road, so there won't be any mistakes. After turning to the small path in the northwest direction, The traces of the horses and hunting dogs will easily be traced back 1 or 2 days ago. If everything goes well, they won't even need 2 days to find us. Our so-called secret operation is not worth mentioning in the face of real power. It's just like when you played hide-and-seek with the adults when you were young. However, we still decided to save as much water and food as possible because we have to be prepared. For example, the Chi family's old man finds out that he's the son of the Wong family next door and decides not to keep him. Or a sandstorm. Everyone likes miracles, but we can't use miracles as our countermeasures. Lu Xiaoyi's judgment was perfectly replicated in Pu City. With the help of the Liu Yao family, the potential of these merchants was quickly revealed. Although they wanted to beat these people to death with a stick, that was in the future. They were the legitimate sons of their respective families, and some were even the only children. It was impossible to give them up and let them fend for themselves. When the merchants offered their biggest bargaining chip, money, there was nothing they couldn't do. A large number of horse caravans were sent out, and the scale was far beyond Lu Xiaoyi's imagination. Therefore, their whereabouts on the main road were easily tracked down. The problem was when they turned to the small path in the northwest direction. Lu Xiaoyi's guess was so accurate that he didn't even miss the sandstorm. This was a rarely seen large-scale sandstorm. For the Gobi Desert, no one dared to travel in such weather, let alone look for people, even if it was a large group of horse caravans. It was so dark that they couldn't even see their own fingers. All traces had been cleaned up by the sandstorm. The sandstorm came and went quickly. After a day of devastation, what appeared before everyone's eyes was a clean and tidy sand world. Even the pits had been filled up, not to mention the horses' hoof prints. This operation to save the naughty child had no choice but to use human wave tactics. Not only were there horse caravans, but there was also a high reward for the person who discovered the child. This made a large number of ordinary people, especially those who had experience living in the Gobi Desert, join in enthusiastically. During this period of time, the Gobi Desert was filled with people. The target range was quickly narrowed down and locked down. The cave carvings on the cliff weren't that secretive. Chapter 34. The brats did not have a clear idea of how long they had been in the cave. Because they could not see the ceiling, they had no way of determining the time between day and night. In this kind of boring wait, there was no light. It was a test of their endurance and willpower. Anxiety, irritation, disappointment, and thirst were all tests for this group of youngsters. In fact, talking and telling stories was a good way to pass the time. But the problem was that their water was limited. They were in a dilemma. Lu Xiaoyi chewed on the flatbread in his mouth. In a dry desert, the flatbread would not spoil, but it would harden due to the lack of water. It would become like a roasted naan, very fragrant, but difficult to swallow. Every time, everyone would be given a piece of biscuit the size of half a palm. They swallowed it with difficulty with clear water. This was also the only time they drank water in a day. It was placed together with the biscuit. Lu Xiaoyi slowly and carefully chewed on the flatbread. Every time, he would only break off a small piece. He first put it in his mouth to soften it, then slowly chew it as much as possible. He swallowed it with his saliva. When he could not swallow it, he would add a mouthful of water. Usually, this flatbread could be eaten in 2 or 3 bites, but now he needed to eat it for 2 hours. It had been a long time since they had gone to the toilet. Everyone was the same, so ironically, although they were in a corner, there was unexpectedly no smell. They were afraid of exhausting their strength, so everyone tried not to move. Sleeping was the best method, but the problem was that even Fatty Qian, who loved to sleep like a pig, could not sleep forever. Lu Xiaoyi knew that the words he said a few days ago had already been doubted. Some people were already thinking about what would have happened if they had used all their strength to climb up when there was water and food. Maybe they would have still failed, but at least they had tried. It was better than waiting for death like this. However, this kind of mental change had not erupted yet. It was still within everyone's rational control, but how long could it last? If the rescue team did not come, this kind of dangerous thought would definitely erupt. As Lu Xiaoyi chewed on the pancake and thought about his worries, He didn't realize that this was the end of his journey in this world. Unfortunately, his current strength was limited. Facing a 100-feet high cliff, he was completely unable to determine the degree of structure of the earth cliff. He had no way of climbing up by himself. Which direction should he climb? How should he dig a hole? Would he be unscathed if he fell again? Would there be another collapse? In his opinion, waiting for help was more likely than struggling on his own. This place was only about 100 miles away from Pooh City, and it was only a few dozen miles into the Gobi Desert. It was impossible for such an earth cliff cave to be completely unknown among the local aborigines. As long as someone was looking for it, they would definitely find it. It was just a matter of time. A rustling sound was heard. The sound was very soft, but it was still very clear in the quiet space. Lu Xiaoyi stopped chewing to make sure that the sound was not coming from his mouth. The sound came from not far from his feet. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the lantern. In the darkness, in the depths of despair, in the crypt, this kind of rustling made one's scalp tingle. Lu Xiaoyi suppressed the fear in his heart. He had to figure out what this was, or else he wouldn't be at ease, because he guessed that it was most likely a common poisonous creature in the Gobi Desert, such as a sand snake or a sand scorpion. He was very careful. He wrapped a piece of cloth around his arms and hands, took out a flint, found the right place, and gently touched it. The small lantern emitted a soft and weak light, but under the illumination of the lantern, no suspicious creatures were found. Could it be that he had escaped by burrowing into the ground? Xiaoyi, don't move. That's a white sandworm. Chi'er, who was beside him, felt strange when he saw him lighting the lantern. Under his guidance, Lu Xiaoyi finally found something unusual on the sand. It was a fleshy worm that was about an inch long. It was white and fat, like a baby cocoon, but its entire body was hidden in the sand, leaving only its grain-sized head exposed. It was dark, so it was no wonder that Lu Xiaoyi couldn't see it. What is this? It doesn't seem to have any attack power. Second brother, your eyesight is really good. You can see it clearly from a few feet away. Chi'er said seriously. Xiaoyi, don't underestimate it. This is not a normal worm. It's a spiritual worm. I can see it not because of my good eyesight, but because of the weak spiritual waves it emits. When this little thing is in danger, it will stimulate its spiritual waves to scare the other party. Normal sand snakes and scorpions will retreat. This is its instinct. It doesn't have eyes, so it doesn't know that it's actually facing a human. Spiritual worm? There's such a thing in the Illuminati kingdom? Then wouldn't catching them be able to help you with your cultivation? Lu Xiaoyi asked a layman's question. Chi'er sighed. There are some spiritual creatures in this world, but they are very rare and very basic. Take this white sandworm, for example. It doesn't have much intelligence and acts on instinct. It's a specialty of Pooh City's Gobi Desert. I heard that they survive by going deep underground to eat the limited spiritual veins. They are very agile and will dive into the ground at the slightest movement. It's very difficult to catch them. The spiritual power of this thing is very limited. One or two of them are meaningless for cultivation. If you really want to rely on them for cultivation, you can only rely on large numbers. How can it be that easy? Anyway, I haven't heard of any suitable methods to catch them. Maybe a real immortal has a way, but why would a cultivator of that level be interested in this worm? Lu Xiaoyi asked curiously. Will this thing bite when it's cornered? Chi'er shook his head. The white sandworm's mouth part is limited. It won't bite. When it's in danger, it will usually act like a scorpion and use the sharp hook on its tail to sting people. The average person will be in pain for a few days. If they get stung too many times, it might even be life-threatening. Lu Xiaoyi was very interested. But I don't think this white sandworm has a long tail. Chi'er explained. Of course you can't see it now. Its tail is hidden in its body. When it's in danger, it will stick its tail out and sting people. Then, the tail will stay in the opponent's body. It's a bit like a wasp, but it can't fly. Lu Xiaoyi understood. Oh, I know. Like a wasp, it leaves its poison in the opponent's body and waits for it to take effect. Chi'er nodded. That's roughly what it means. But the white sandworm is not poisonous. Its tail is actually where its spiritual power resides. When it stings someone, it's equivalent to forcing out their entire life's spiritual power. To an ordinary person, spiritual poison is also poison. Moans came from the wounded. Chier told him that as long as he didn't touch the white sandworms, they would leave on their own. Then, he hurried to where the wounded were lying. Among the 3 wounded, Monkey was better off, but Taiju and youngest Han were not in a good condition. They could only drink water and couldn't swallow pancakes. Even if they broke them and spread them with water, they still couldn't do anything. These days, they had tried their best, but they couldn't do much in the dark. They were also amateurs, so there wasn't much they could do to help. Lu Xiaoyi didn't move. He carefully observed the white sandworm's movements. At least, this was a way to divert his attention. He noticed that 2 more white sandworms had appeared and were surrounding the original one. He didn't know what they were doing. After a long time, he seemed to have realized something. But before he could put his conjecture into practice, a suppressed cry came from the wounded. It was Fatty's voice. Putting down the white sandworm, Lu Xiaoyi walked over. The person who left was Taiju, a very steady comrade. Ever since he fell, he hadn't woken up. The terrible environment prevented him from receiving any effective treatment. This was the second one. First, it was Madame Feng, then it was Wang Taiju. Who was the next one? Was it youngest Han? Or all of them? He didn't know how long it had been, but it felt very long. This was an illusion due to the oppressive environment. But judging from their water and food reserves, it shouldn't have been more than 10 days. After such a long time, why hadn't help come yet? Even Lu Xiaoyi started to doubt himself. Chapter 35. After a short period of crying, Fatty suddenly stood up and rushed towards the wall of the cave that he had already chosen. He picked up a shovel in his hand and started digging. He dug a few small holes for him to step on and climbed up. He then dug again and then fell down. Fortunately, he could not climb very high. The highest he climbed was no more than 10 feet, so he did not fall down. The loss of physical strength and mental suppression almost caused him to collapse. Seeing that there was no hope for him to continue climbing, Fatty rushed in front of Lu Xiaoyi. His eyes were red and his expression was ferocious. Li Sanlang, who was at the side, secretly grabbed the handle of a shovel. "You are a scholar. You have the ability. Little E, tell me now, what should I do? I don't want to be suffocated to death like this. I don't want to see them leave one by one. You have the ability. Didn't you already make preparations for this?" Under the dim light, Lu Xiaoyi sighed. Of course, one of the characteristics of scholar is that no matter what, they have their own preparations, even if it is death. Of course I have my own preparations. Pay attention. Lu Xiaoyi took a sip of water and reluctantly spat out half of it onto his palm. Then, he gently smoothed his messy hair. Even if it is death, the shape of the head cannot be messed up. Make your face clean. This way, when it is dug up by others, you will look cultured. Your clothes must be tidied up calmly. You cannot be disheveled. If you are too sloppy, even the little ghost will look down on you. Sit against the wall. This way, when you die, you will not fall down. Wear a smile on your face. Just like an ordinary meditation in your own courtyard. Have a demeanor. Everything does not matter. It is just the beginning of another life. Just like ascending to the heavens to enjoy life, while these living fools are still reluctant to suffer in the mortal world. Fatty Qian was stunned when he heard this. He stomped his feet and turned to leave. "You lunatic! Little E, you are a lunatic. You scholars are all lunatics." Li Sanlang, who was at the side, sighed deeply and put down the shovel. He was very curious. How did a rich young master who lived like a prince in the Sima residence develop such an unmoved temperament? This required an extremely deep understanding of life. Only a wise and far-sighted old man could do this. Thinking about it carefully, other than this, what else could they do? Li Sanlang imitated Lu Xiaoyi and sat on the wall of the cave. He straightened his posture and tidied up his sleeves. With a smile on his face, he emptied his mind and imagined the beauty of the heavenly realm and the charms of fairies. While he was immersed in it, he vaguely heard some voices. If the horse is here, then the person must be here. He spread out to search. 100 caves, not a single one will be missed. Commander, come quickly. There's a deep cave here. Li Sanlang's heart tightened, and then he relaxed. The string that had been stretched taut for many days went limp, and his mind swayed. His body leaned against the wall of his acupoint and fell down. He was still regretting it in his heart. Since he was already here, he had to maintain his poise. Unfortunately, his body didn't listen to his brain. In Pooh City, a major event that everyone knew had happened recently, a group of rich second-generation heirs whimsically went to the Gobi Desert for an outing and to look for secrets. In the end, a nameless cave at the edge of the Gobi Desert collapsed. Of the 8 people, 2 were dead and several were injured. It was a tragic sight. It was said that a few of them were brought back by horse carriages. It was hard to say whether they would be crippled in the end. Among the 8 rich second-generation heirs, there was also a second-generation official. He was the young master of the famous Lu province family in Pooh City. No one knew how badly he was injured. How did a noble and scholarly person get involved with these little devils? In an ordinary courtyard house in the west of the city, a scholar was drinking with a few of his classmates. The wine was the cheapest wine in a small shop in the alley, and the dish was a plate of 5 flavored beans. Although it was very shabby, it didn't hinder them from discussing the current affairs of the country. As the saying goes, although one is poor, one doesn't dare to forget one's country. I heard that Pooh City has gone to war this time, and there are hundreds of government troops involved. Since he's using public resources for private purposes, let's join forces with the prefectures and counties to write a joint letter to the Minister of Education. Even if we can't topple the prefect of Pooh City, we can still disgust him so that he won't be too biased towards those rich people in the future, especially those from Lu province. I've already thought of the topic. How can the country's taxes be used for private purposes? In the long run, the city will no longer be a city, and the country will no longer be a country. Won't the fierce war become a tool for the local officials to seek personal benefits? One of the scholars was impassioned, while the other one agreed. That's right. If you want to join forces, count me in. It's time to change the atmosphere in Pooh City. A former prefect who's been around for almost 20 years can still call the wind and summon the rain, but the surrounding rich people don't dare to speak up. Isn't it strange? Our generation is studying, cultivating our bodies, and serving our country. It's time for us to speak up. Let's join forces, friends, and schoolmates. The summer imperial examination isn't far away. Let's leave a deep impression on the Minister of Education and move up the ranks. Everyone applauded. After a while, they looked at the owner of this place, Wu Shuang. They were all Wu Shuang's best friends. Talking about the country and ambitions was just a facade to put on a show. There was only one real reason. It was because Wu Shuang was unfairly treated at the Lake Outing Spring Festival, as well as the subtle suppression and ostracization by the various departments in Pooh City. Various official literary gatherings didn't invite him, and most of the aristocrats kept a respectful distance from him. The most important thing was that in this year's autumn imperial examination of literature, young Master Wu Shuang was not selected. Instead, other scholars who were far inferior to him participated. Needless to say, anyone with a discerning eye could see that this was Lu province blaming him for speaking without restraint during the spring festival and secretly exerting pressure on him. In the circle of poor scholars, Lu province's actions were very unpopular. That was why they jointly complained to the Minister of Education. In this world, in the Kingdom of Yi, scholars had a very high status. Perhaps it was also because they wanted to suppress cultivators. Like them, the most basic literary documents had the right to jointly submit a memorial to the Minister of Education. Of course, this kind of memorial was not formal. It was not something that the officials had to pay attention to and respond to. The purpose of these documents was to express their attitude, resistance, and dissatisfaction. As the chief official, the Minister of Education could ignore it. He could also mention it to the local chief official and do the scholars a favor. He could also gain a reputation for speaking up for justice. However, it was impossible for him to report these dissatisfaction as if they were serious. Did he have nothing better to do? Offending his colleagues in the official circle for a group of poor students? Wu Shuang smiled faintly. Be careful. As far as I know, the prefecture's cavalry didn't use the treasury's money this time. Secondly, the merchants paid for it themselves. So, if you want to use the treasury for your own personal gain, this rule is not valid. In my opinion, a joint statement is excellent, but you have to find another reason. For example, the country's weapons, the army's weapons, are the pillars of the country. How can they be moved by the merchant's profit? This way, the level is higher and sharper. Under the righteous cause, they can't refute it. Chapter 36. When everyone heard this, they clapped their hands in agreement. A scholar who was walking closest to Wu Shuang said mysteriously to show that he was different. Wu Shuang, tell us the truth. Was it that person from Lanwei County who sent you the message? On the other hand, Wu Shuang was magnanimous. He had nothing to hide. He even wanted to tell everyone that although he was poor and had nowhere to go after being hit by a brick during the spring assembly, he was the final winner in the most important spring assembly. That's right. If we hit the snake where it hurts, we'll be a joke. Not only will others laugh at us, even the Minister of Education will look down on us. I won't participate in this. Thanks to Miss Lin's help, I managed to get a place for the examination in Lanwei County. I'll be leaving the prefecture in a few days. Firstly, it's to familiarize myself with the environment. Secondly, it's to concentrate on studying. I really can't worry about this. The scholar said enviously. A place for Lanwei County? That's your cheap father-in-law's arrangement, right? Brother Wu Shuang, you found a good wife. You found a good wife. You don't have to worry about the joint signing. We'll handle it. The Minister of Education's itinerary happened to pass through Pu City during the summer civil service examination. Once we submit the joint signing, he might stay here to supervise. With Lu Province's idiotic literary talent, even if he did well in the examination, he might not be able to get in. He has to be very outstanding. Does he have the talent? Everyone laughed and enjoyed themselves. They only left when the sky was about to turn dark. His mother brought over a bowl of thick porridge. Wu Shuang, drinking too much wine is bad for your stomach. Have a bowl of porridge. Wu Shuang took it respectfully and ate it calmly. His mother went back to the kitchen and brought out a bowl of clear porridge. People from different eras had different views on filial piety. If Lu Xiaoyi was him, why would he study? Even if he had to be a bandit, he would let his mother live a carefree life. Why would she have to sew and mend every day to feed such a big son? You're even allowed to drink? Can you even drink? However, filial piety in this world was somewhat different. One was willing to work hard, while the other was taking enjoyment for granted. The thought of inheriting was that in the future, after obtaining scholarly honors and becoming an official, they would be able to live a life of luxury. They did not think that at their age, would they still be able to eat and drink by then? Would he be able to hold out until the glorious day? This world was like this, not only Wu Shuang, but also his so-called poor friends. Almost every poor person had a great woman behind them, be it his wife, mother, or sister. Wu Shuang frowned as he drank the porridge. He felt that there was a bit of rotting smell in the porridge. This was the unique smell of the old grain in the warehouse. Of course, he would not blame his mother, but he had never thought of getting a few pounds of new rice with his own ability. To him, there was only one goal: Chinese literature, Chinese classics, and Chinese classics. Then, he would take revenge for everything that he had experienced. Of course, he wouldn't participate in the joint signing. It wasn't that he didn't have time, and it wasn't that he had to prepare for the general examination. These weren't important, and he had no problem dealing with them. What was important was that as long as he signed his name on the joint signing, regardless of whether he succeeded or not, he would leave the impression that he liked to cause trouble. In the future, he would need to manage all kinds of businesses, including these trivial matters and marriage. Those who were in high spirits after drinking a little wine would never have a future. Finding a private school to teach in Pu City would be the best outcome for them. But he was different. In Lu Province, it had been 3 days since Lu Xiaoyi came back from the cave. In these 3 days, The two old ladies did not call him even once. They did not ask him questions, scold him, or punish him. They just left him hanging. Leaving him hanging was also a form of punishment, especially for people with self-esteem and shame. Lu Xiaoyi didn't have any serious injuries, but he'd been starving for the past few days. Other than that, there were a few superficial wounds that had already healed when he was trapped in the enclosed space. This was the advantage of a young body. These few days, he ate and slept and ate and exercised in the morning and evening. His body quickly returned to normal, but it would take some time for his heart to return to normal. He didn't leave the food because he knew that his reckless behavior had really hurt his mother. If he went out without caring about anything, there would be a crack in the relationship between mother and son. Once there was a crack, it would take a lot of effort to recover. He had time, but his mother might not have it. There was nowhere to go. Presumably, the families of his friends didn't welcome him, just like how Lu Yaoshe didn't welcome the others, especially Tai Zhu and Feng Yangzi's families. It wasn't the right time to mourn. They would definitely think, "Why are you unharmed, but my child died an unnatural death?" This was human nature, and there was nothing to complain about. The 6 of them who were still alive were either recuperating or being grounded. They also stopped contacting each other. There was an advisor from the government office who came to ask about the incident. He said that since they had left the Fu city, there had to be a reason. However, Lu Xiaoyi knew that the whole process wasn't important. What was important was who had brought up this activity and who had organized it. This way, the families who had died would have a place to vent their anger. He insisted that this was a joint decision, and it wasn't about who had influenced who. It was just a drunken impulse after a banquet. This was the countermeasure that they had discussed in the cave. No matter what, they couldn't let Qi Er bear the responsibility alone. That would be unfair. He believed that no one who was still alive would shirk their responsibility on this issue. What was there to shirk? It wouldn't end well if they shirked their responsibility, but if they didn't shirk their responsibility, they wouldn't let them pay with their lives. This was a muddled account, and the final result would be nothing. On the 3rd day, the old lady still didn't see him. Even if it was dawn and dusk, Lu Xiaoyi couldn't sit still after eating lunch. He felt that it was better to make things clear. It wasn't because he was happy, but because he didn't want his old mother to be angry all the time. Therefore, he went to the backyard again. The servant still refused, but he didn't shrink back. Instead, he showed the attitude of a little master of Lu province. "Go and report now. Tell her that I'm here to see my mother. If you can't do it, go to the accountant's room and pay the bill." After he finished speaking, he stepped in. The servants had no choice. They couldn't use force, right? How could they get involved in the matter between the mother and son? Along the way, the maidservants and servants he saw all moved aside when they saw him enter. They didn't stop him, nor did they come forward to lead him. This included the old servants who were guarding the door. Lu Xiaoyi stood in the middle of the courtyard. Her silver hair, which was already half white, reflected the light of the afternoon sun. Lu Xiaoyi suddenly realized that her white hair was much more white than when he had just transmigrated. Perhaps the original Lu Xiaoyi had caused more trouble in his entire life than he had in the past few months. He walked in front of his mother and knelt down. "Mother, your unfilial son Xiao, he has come to see you." Chapter 37. Contrary to Lu Xiaoyi's expectations, his mother did not show much anger. Instead, she seemed a little tired. "Little E is here. Your aunt Saihuan went out to handle some matters, which is also the mess you left behind. I originally wanted to wait for her to come back before telling you. But since you are here, then I won't delay. Get up and follow me." Lu Xiaoyi was confused as he followed his mother into the depths of the inner courtyard. Large mansions had their own rules. It did not mean that just because Lu Xiaoyi was the little master here, he could go everywhere. At the very least, there were a few places in his mother's inner courtyard that he could not go to. One was a small temple in the inner courtyard, and the other was his father's former study. The original Lu Xiaoyi was very obedient and very polite. He never came to these places. He could not even finish reading the books in his own large library. So how could he have time to look for books in his father's small study? In his mind, The books here must be related to the governance of the country, and he did not have any interest in them. Now that his soul had transmigrated, he did not have any concept in this area. He did not even have any thoughts about it. He respected his mother in this life very much, and slowly began to treat himself as a real son. However, to have him treat a person who had died nearly 20 years ago as his father and respect him from the bottom of his heart was somewhat difficult. Therefore, not coming into contact with his father was the most basic idea. The place Lu Yaoshe brought him to was Lu Sima's small study. Although it was called a small study, it was actually not that small. It was even larger than Lu Xiaoyi's study. The furnishings were very simple, and the windows were brightly lit. At a glance, it was clear that it was regularly cleaned. The most conspicuous thing was the few large bookshelves placed along the wall. They were filled with bamboo slips, but it was impossible to tell what the contents were. Lu Xiaoyi looked at his mother and asked doubtfully, "Mother, this is?" Lu Yaoshe walked in front of him and touched his face that was already taller than hers. She said dotingly, "Little E has grown up. Being able to cause trouble outside means that you can take care of things. Mother will not restrain you or punish you, because when you grow up, you always have to pay a price. What you did not have when you were young, you can make up for it when you grow up. You just need to remember what you promised, Mother." Lu Xiaoyi still didn't understand. Lu Yaoshe pulled him to a bookcase and pointed at a bookcase filled with bamboo slips. "I know that little E is interested in cultivation, but I don't want you to be obsessed with it. This is not only my wish, but also your father's wish. But when little E grew up, he had his own ideas. It's better to let it go than to block it. Only now do I understand this principle. I've been trying to prevent you from coming into contact with it. But in the end, there was this farce of a treasure hunt in a cave. How could there be any treasures outside? If there really was one, how could it be your turn? It was all a lie. It was just selling a treasure map for money. Your father doesn't approve of cultivation, not because it's useless, but because it takes up a lot of the time of a young and promising man. When he's old, most of the time, he'll be mediocre and won't benefit the country or his family. With his status, he's only below one person and above tens of thousands of people. He's also come into contact with countless cultivators, and among them, there are many cultivation friends. Of course, he's also accumulated a lot of cultivation methods. Some are given by others, and some were seized. They're all recorded in the bamboo slips in this bookcase. I should have destroyed these things long ago, but I can't bear to part with your father's things. Since little E wants to pursue cultivation wholeheartedly, Mother will fulfill your wish and let you see what the real cultivation world is. What real cultivation is. When you understand, when you know that this is just the impulse of a young man, then little E will still have to return to your original self. By doing so, at least your soul won't be taken away by any treasure. Mother and your Aunt Saihuan only have you as a child. If something happens to you, how can we live on?" Lu Xiaoyi was moved and held his mother's hand. "Mother, don't worry. In the future, I won't easily put myself in danger. I promise." Lu Yaoshe let go and left. It could be said that one of her wishes had been fulfilled. She had always hidden her husband's secret stash from her son because she was afraid that he would be addicted to it. In the end, if she let him search for it himself, who knows what kind of trouble he would find. What if he was cheated by someone? What if he practiced a shady cultivation method? What if he went down the wrong path? If that was really the case, it would be better to tell him the proper cultivation methods. When her husband was alive, he had also said that these methods were the purest Taoist teachings. It was just that they were too difficult, too time-consuming, and not suitable for large-scale promotion. Lu Sima did not wish for this world to become a world where everyone did not produce anything, but instead pursued an ethereal immortality. This was also the most basic concept of a scholar. If the act of cultivating the Tao was only for oneself, it could not help the people. If one only took and did not give, why should one support it? Her husband did his best to control cultivation, but her son yearned for it. What a sin! But no matter what, her only goal now was to not let this boy blindly wander around outside. Didn't he like cultivation? Fine, I'll give it to you. Let's see how you cultivate it. Once he had tasted the hardships and started to retreat, that would truly be the end of it. Lu Xiaoyi watched his mother leave. He knew this heavy love. If he was the original Lu Xiaoyi, he would have directly chosen not to read it. But he wasn't. Although his previous life was also a world where cultivation wasn't allowed, for some reason, when he came to this place, it was as if his life existed for the sake of cultivation. This was more like a kind of obsession, an obsession that had been poisoned by the messy literature of his previous life. He didn't immediately open the book box. Instead, he quietly considered it for a long time before laughing self-deprecatingly. Then, he would just be a mortal who was afraid of death. He gently opened the book box. Although there were often people cleaning outside, the bamboo slips in the book box were clearly a restricted area exception. A thick layer of dust covered the bamboo slips. This was the accumulation of more than 10 years. These things that could change one's life just lay there quietly, accepting the ravages of time. He found a rag in the study room. He didn't dare to touch it with water, so he just brushed the dust off the bamboo slips one by one. He was afraid that the water would affect the preservation of the bamboo slips. But it seemed that things related to cultivation shouldn't be so fragile. There were a total of 13 bamboo slips. And there were also some jade slips. They were neatly arranged in front of him. Lu Xiaoyi simply sat cross-legged on the ground and looked at these treasures. His emotions surged. He had worked hard for several months and only obtained a book that didn't even have a name. There were no tools to complement it, and he didn't dare to cultivate it. But all of this turned out to be so simple in front of his mother. It was so simple that he didn't dare to imagine it. Just like in his previous life, he hoped to have a house in the city as a nest. In the end, the heavens directly gave him 13 houses. Practice one set and throw one set away. Chapter 38. He still did not know what it was, so the first thing he did was to look at the name. Middle parallel chi formula. This should be a cultivation method. Old Lord gathers chi. This is his experience. Tornado, escape technique. This is a movement technique. 7 forms of fire. This might be a fighting technique, teaching people how to set fire. Ice chapter of water unchanging. This should also be a spell application. Qing Wei thought, this function is not clear, but it seems to be the foundation of a cultivation method. Summary of Mount Zhong's cultivation. This can be read first. It is beneficial to understand the cultivation principles and system of this world as a whole. 3,000 years of witnessing strange forms. Is this a biography or cultivation history? True talisman. This is very clear, teaching people how to draw talismans. Analysis of common formations, playing with formations. Paper doll technique. This seems a bit unorthodox. Concealment. This is not bad. It seems to be able to pretend to be something or fight something. Reckless ox body. This is a body strengthening technique. This name is a bit old-fashioned. Can it be given a nicer name? Lu Xiaoyi read through the 13 books, but did not continue to delve deeper. He did not have any cultivation experience, but he had deep-rooted learning experience from his previous life. Randomly picking a book and starting a practice. This is the stupidest way to do it. When you're preparing to enter a new world, the most important thing is to have a clear understanding of this new world from a holistic point of view. Even if it is not comprehensive, even if there are mistakes, you must do so. This is even more so for the cultivation system. Therefore, he took out 3 books and put the rest back into the box. He picked up the cleaning utensils outside the study and tidied up the small study, which was a little messy because he had dusted himself. This was the attitude of a book lover. The 3 books are Old Lord Gathers Chi, Summary of Mount Zhong's Cultivation, 3,000 Years of Witnessing Strange Forms. Holding the 3 books, Lu Xiaoyi returned to his mother's room. There are still 2 more months to the summer examination. I will not give up studying just because I am interested in cultivation, I promised you. I will definitely do it. Lu Yaosher looked at him and sighed. Little E, your words are getting better and better, but your ability to cause trouble is also getting bigger and bigger. You tell me, do I believe your good words? Or do you want to see what you do? For this year's summer quarter examination in Pooh City, There was a county's minister of education and politics personally supervising the examination. It was possible that he would personally come up with the questions. Official Yang was an honest and upright official. He was a gentleman who could not bear to see filthy things. Therefore, he had to restrain himself when it came to small tricks. He preferred the temperament of a mature young man. From now on, until the results of the summer imperial examinations are released, I will not restrain you. Whether you study hard at home or go out to meet friends, you are free to do so. You only need to remember that your Aunt Kai Huan is already preparing for your marriage. It may be a little sloppy, but if you fail the summer imperial examinations, it will be the day you carry on the Liu family's ancestral line. If you can't pass the book, you have to pass the bloodline. Liu Xiaoyi sighed all the way back. His mother's control of him was truly inherited from a big family. In short, you have to contribute something to the Liu family. If you can't bring out your talent, then you have to contribute to your children and grandchildren. When he returned to his courtyard, he told Ping and that from today onwards, he would be closing the door to all visitors. In fact, it was also like taking off his pants to let out air. With his current situation, who would come to visit him? Of the 3 bamboo slips, the 3,000 Years Book of Strange Shapes was the longest, with tens of thousands of words. The elderly lord gathers qi and asks was the shortest, with only a few thousand words. For someone like him who had been immersed in the sea of books in both his previous and current life, this amount of reading was not enough for him to finish in half a day. However, it was different from the web novels in his previous life where he could read 10 lines at a glance and cut out the beginning and the end. He could even know the content just by looking at the title of the chapter. The content of these bamboo slips needed to be carefully studied word by word. He even had to repeatedly inquire and understand before he could barely understand the meaning. 5 days later, Liu Xiaoyi, who had read through the 3 bamboo slips, stopped. On his writing desk, there were tens of thousands of words of annotations and questions that he had written. Reading books and taking notes, self-improvement, and not forsaken by the heavens. He closed his eyes and meditated, going through the 3 bamboo slips again from beginning to end. It was the 4th month since he came to this world that he had a rough understanding of the general context of cultivation in this world. It was certainly not comprehensive, because the height of the author was not necessarily high. It was also certainly not systematic, because his father did not cultivate. His bamboo slips about cultivation came from a variety of sources. At first glance, it was obvious that they came from different systems and different groups of people. His mother said that some of them were gifts from friends. In his opinion, there were certainly gifts from friends, but most of them must have been confiscated. The position of Minister of War gave him the opportunity to receive good things from his subordinates. In the kingdom of the Shining Night, or, in other words, in the cultivation system of several countries, including the Shining Night, there were countless classifications. However, the manifestation of these classifications was very vague. So far, he had only seen the fire form, the ice art, the wind escape, and possibly the paper man. This was a small matter of magic, not something he should be concerned about now. Although he had never been in contact with cultivation, the basic principles of heaven and earth were universal. It was very naive to talk about the direction of magic without a solid foundation. It was just like in his previous life. How could you talk about the specific direction of research if you did not have a foundation in mathematics and physics? From these 3 bamboo slips, he had a rough understanding of the main paths that humans in this world took to cultivate. One was the method that Qi, Air, and Li San used to enter the path of cultivation through instruments. There was a fixed method, a fixed direction, and a fixed instrument. For example, Qi, Air, and the others had a sword, and Li San had a fire. They had no choice because such opportunities were hard to come by. They could only rely on whatever they bumped into and not according to their own interests. This method was called the instrument nurturing method. The advantage was that it was easy to get started, and it was also the most important cultivation method in this world. There were also disadvantages, and it was a very fundamental disadvantage. There were too many limitations, and it limited the path of cultivation from the beginning. No matter whether you were willing or not, Unless there were disruptive changes in the future, you could only walk on this path for the rest of your life. As for the deeper impact, the bamboo slips did not explain in detail. Perhaps one could only understand it by walking on. The second method was the worshipping method, which was mainly passed down in remote areas because under the power of the country, in places where humans settled on a large scale, no one could tolerate such an existence. The last method was the art of eating qi, which was also the most respected method of Taoism. It was the original Tao, the root, and had countless possibilities. In the 13 bamboo slips left behind by Lu Xiaoyi's cheap old man, they were all about the third method. It seemed that Sima Lu was not completely ignorant about cultivation. They were all authentic, and they were all about the right path of the universe. When Sima Lu left these bamboo slips behind, did he think that the one who fell into the trap was his own son? Chapter 39. If he could use all of them, it meant that he did not know which one to use. Without a guide, without a system, without an organization, it was the tragedy of a lone cultivator. The cultivation levels of this world were introduced in the Old Lord's Qi collection essay. It was divided into 3 stages: Qi Eater, Sensing, and Controlled Dan. Qi Air and Li San were probably the most basic stage of Qi Eater. Their problem was that there was no qi to consume. Zhongshan's cultivation summary had mentioned that although this world could cultivate, it was at the lowest level of cultivation. The world's heaven and earth qi eater was extremely thin, and it was destined that the number of successful cultivators would be limited. It was also impossible to spread it on a large scale. Therefore, to be precise, this was not a real cultivation world. There were very few qi cultivators in the mortal world, and they spent most of their time roaming the dangerous mountains and remote rivers in pursuit of the ethereal heaven and earth qi eater. This was also the reason why the weapon nurturing technique was so popular in this world. It meant that the heaven and earth's qi cultivators were almost unable to sense it. Even true qi cultivators were bitterly searching for it, not to mention ordinary people who wanted to enter Tao. Therefore, there was the method of relying on spiritual objects to stimulate Tao. The problem was that spiritual objects could help you for a while, but not forever. Qi Air and his gang, Li San Lang, had all stopped at this stage. They were powerless to continue and could only watch helplessly as their little bit of cultivation slowly dissipated over time. A few years later, they returned to the state of ordinary people. It was a classic example of easy to get started, but difficult to further study. The Qi Eater technique that Taoists worshipped was harder to get started than the weapon nurturing technique. This was because one could not obtain the help of the Qi Eater from spiritual objects. Perhaps some disciples in secluded cultivation sects could complete it with the help of their elders. But to a lone cultivator, this was destined to be an impossible goal. However, the advantage of the Qi Eater technique was that once one succeeded in Qi Eater, their future path would be much wider. They would not be restricted to finding spiritual objects of the same nature. As long as there was Qi Eater, they could consume it for their own use. Both paths required a suitable environment or spiritual objects. In this aspect, Lu Xiaoyi did not have anything. He was not in a hurry and continued to study the 3 bamboo slips until he completely understood the theory. 10 days later, Lu Xiaoyi carried the 3 bamboo slips to see his mother. He wanted to change a few books to read, but Lu Yaoshe sighed. "Little E, you don't have to be so careful. Since I've given these things to you, they're yours. Take them all." Changing a few books every few days. Are you trying to tell me that you don't care about them? Lu Xiaoyi was embarrassed. In front of his mother, he had nowhere to hide his thoughts. In reality, he really hadn't prepared at all for the summer quarter examinations. If one day you lose interest in these things, help me destroy them. I can't do anything about you, but I can't let my grandchildren make the same mistake. Lu Xiaoyi laughed dryly. Thus, he unceremoniously moved the 13 scrolls back to his study. From then on, he began his cultivation research. After carefully studying the 13 scrolls, he realized that he didn't have many choices. Cultivating the 7 forms of fire, water impermanence, ice chapter wind escape, concealment, common formation analysis, talisman, true talisman, paper doll technique. These were all applications of Tao. They were optional and not compulsory. The reckless ox body was a body cultivation method. Lu Xiaoyi could not imagine that he would return to the level of fighting and killing after all the hardships he had gone through to successfully ingesting qi. The clear micro-cultivation technique was a more advanced technique. It trained the spirit of a qi cultivator. To Lu Xiaoyi, if he didn't even have qi, how could he talk about spirit? Thus, after many choices, he could only choose the medium parallel qi formula. It was the beginning of his cultivation. The method of cultivation was divided into standing, sitting, and lying. To a beginner, sitting was the best way to start. According to the requirements of the medium parallel qi formula, one had to sit cross-legged on the couch, relax the body, lower the eyes, place the tongue on the palate, and breathe naturally. The whole body was relaxed, not soft and curled up. One had to keep the head and spine straight so that the meridians were unobstructed. However, one should not become stiff and stiff. His eyes drooped down, and he closed them slightly. This was because it was easy to have distracting thoughts when the eyes were open. If all the eyes were closed, one would fall asleep easily. Both were not conducive to cultivation. This was the opening 3 times and closing 7 times. One had to see something in front of one's eyes, but not be able to distinguish it. Place the tongue on the palate and close the mouth. One had to roll the tip of the tongue back and place the bottom of the tongue on the palate. This was because there were 2 small pits on the palate called the Tianqi acupoint. It was easy for the spirit to leak. Breathe naturally and naturally. However, one had to avoid being rough. As the degree of meditation deepened, one's breathing should gradually become deep, long, even, fine, and slight. The purpose of all these was to enter meditation and feel the spiritual vigor of heaven and earth. Qi refinement warriors who had been practicing this for a long time could enter meditation under almost any circumstances. No matter how noisy, chaotic, or perverted the outside world was, no matter what kind of mood they were in, whether it was ecstasy or agony, they could adjust themselves to such a state of cultivation in an instant. However, it was different for beginners. There were people outside the courtyard, birds chirping outside, people talking, and sudden strange sounds would instantly disrupt the meditation of a beginner. This required long-term training and a certain amount of talent. Some people were born unable to calm down. In Taoist words, the ancestors did not reward them with food. The purpose of entering meditation was to listen to the spiritual vigor. It was to feel the spiritual vigor that surrounded one's body and was everywhere in heaven and earth. In this world, the spiritual vigor in most places was very weak. It could not be said that there was no spiritual vigor, but it was so weak that it could not provide any substantial help to qi refinement warriors. There might be a few places that had spiritual vigor that was relatively stronger. However, one would not be able to ascertain the origin of these places if one was not in the situation. No one would be so foolish as to bring others to such places. There was only so much spiritual vigor. One breath was one breath less. This world also had the inheritance of Taoism. It was the peak of the pyramid among the cultivators. It was the object of envy of the itinerant cultivators who wandered outside. Lu Xiaoyi did not know what conditions he had to meet to be able to join such inheritance. Was it kinship? Or was it extraordinary talent? However, to him, these were meaningless. Because in terms of age, he had already missed the best period to lay the foundation. He did not care too much. Anyway, his purpose was only to live for a few more decades, and at the same time, to see what kind of strange things this new world had. His requirements were not high. Immortal? He had not even thought about it. What was that? Was there such a thing? He simply wanted to see flames mysteriously appear from his fingertips. With a wave of his hand, rain clouds would irrigate the dry farmlands. Like the wind, he would sweep past the young men and women on their excursions. If he focused on his eyes, he would be able to pass through thick walls in the night. It was actually quite simple. However, to realize such a simple artistic idea, one would need to be extremely rational and meticulous. In his eyes, cultivation was to use a string of inner precision to write an artistic life. To him, entering meditation was a piece of cake. It was not because the ancestors gave him food to eat. It was because his soul had undergone immeasurable time in the process of traversing. It had long been honed to be constant and deep, just like the boundless universe. This was his trump card. Unfortunately, even such a trump card could not help him feel the spiritual vigor fluctuations in the air. Or rather, he did not even know what the real spiritual vigor fluctuations were. He did not have this concept, because he had not even started. Chapter 40. Half a month had passed since the cave carving incident. Ping stood in front of the young master and reported the news he had gathered. The second son of the chief family left Pooh City 5 days ago. I heard that he went out for business training with an elder. Rumors said that he was hiding from a disaster. In fact, the magistrate had already concluded that it was an accident. No one was convicted in this incident, so there's no such thing as escaping. The chief family offered generous gifts to the families that died as an apology. This is a private matter and not an official matter, so it's not considered compensation. I think the second son of the chief family will probably stay outside for a long time. There's no hope of inheriting the family. If he goes out, it's probably because he's out of sight, out of mind. It's good for both the family and the people. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. This was within his expectations. Simply put, he could not face it. This was the real world, not the fighting and killing in biographies and novels where people died like dogs. Death was the most important thing. In this peaceful small town, even the sons of rich families could not bear such pressure. It's the same for Fatty Qian. He left even earlier. His specific destination is unknown. As for the others, Monkey is still recuperating. I heard from Dr. Jia that because he hasn't set his bones for a long time, he might become disabled and be confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his life. The youngest son of the Han family has internal injuries. He's already very lucky to be saved, but it's difficult for him to have children, Lu Xiaoyi sighed. He did not expect to pay such a heavy price for the end of a farce. It had fundamentally changed the lives of several families. Among the 7 heroes, he was the luckiest. It was no wonder that his mother would take out his father's treasured items. Although she did not say anything, she must have been frightened by the tragedy. As long as she could keep Lu Xiaoyi tied down, there was nothing that she would not take out. The medical skills of this world were at the level of a normal mortal world. Don't even think about reviving the dead with just a Taoist elixir, reattaching a broken limb, or healing an internal injury with just a strand of magic power. Perhaps a capable Qi cultivator could do it, but the prerequisite was that you had to find such a capable person first. Secondly, the capable person had to have cultivation in the area of elixir. Lastly, why would they help you? Spiritual opportunity was rare. Who would be willing to waste their precious cultivation to treat a mortal? He was a cultivator, not a doctor. This also made Lu Xiaoyi understand that in the initial stage of eating qi, the so-called cultivators were not much different from ordinary people. If they fell from a high place, they would still die and be injured. Due to the limitations of the artifact nurturing technique, their own cultivation and strength would not be of much use in the treatment unless they could obtain other spiritual items. Perhaps it was precisely because they were cultivators that 2 of them escaped after falling from a height of more than 100 feet. If Chengdu was an ordinary person, it would be considered good if 1 or 2 of them could survive. Li Sanlang has been staying at home all this time and hasn't come out. I don't know if he was frightened or grounded. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. Old madam must have taken a lot of money from her, right? Ping lowered his head and replied, yes. Although my Lu province is not considered rich among these few families, old madam's funeral was very generous. In addition, they also used their connections in the province to hire the best doctor for Monkey and the rest. As for the specifics, Aunt Saihuan is in charge. I can't say for sure. Lu Xiaoyi thought of another matter. Do you know what Aunt Saihuan has been busy with recently? Ping shook his head. I don't know. How would we dare to ask about our master's matters? Lu Xiaoyi scolded jokingly. What a crafty fellow. Is there anything in Lu province that you don't know? Are you bullying me because I'm young and ignorant? Ping'an, let me tell you, this matter concerns my happiness for the rest of my life. I can't be careless. Keep a close eye on her. Which family is she from? What's her personality like? What's her appearance like? Once you found out, quickly report to me. Ping'an stammered. Lu Xiaoyi was so angry that he wanted to kick him. Thinking about it, he felt helpless. It was difficult for these servants to report this secret. All right, pack up. I'm going to the city to buy some things. Ping'an was in a difficult position. Young master, this isn't good, right? It's not appropriate for you to go out now. Lu Xiaoyi glared at him. I'm not going out of the city. I'm just going to walk around the streets. Can I do that? Mother didn't restrict me, but you're so strict. Lu Xiaoyi wandered around the streets of Pu City. Although his reputation in Pu City had greatly improved compared to a few months ago, people only heard of him as the little husband of Lu Province. Very few people could match this reputation with his face. The power of the brick at Shaoyi Lake and the deaths in the cave carvings brought him a bad reputation. He was rapidly sliding into the abyss of being a hedonistic son. He didn't care because he enjoyed this kind of reputation. Double standards existed everywhere. People were used to using the standards of a saint to judge a saint, the standards of a madman to judge a madman, and the standards of a scoundrel to judge a scoundrel. What label you put on yourself, people would set expectations for your words and actions based on that label. A good student would be scolded by his teacher if he didn't understand an article. A bad student would be praised by his teacher if he handed in an article on time every year. People who talked about benevolence, righteousness, and morality all day long would be criticized if they did something that didn't match their words and actions. To put it bluntly, it was natural for a hooligan to act like one. However, if you had thick eyebrows and big eyes, don't even talk about acting like a hooligan. Even showing a bit of your hooligan temperament would be unacceptable. This was the only benefit of being a loser in Lu Xiaoyi's previous life. At least, he lived a relaxed and happy life. After coming to this world, he naturally didn't want to let the reputation of Lu Province affect his own reputation. It was good to be a hedonistic son of a family, but it wouldn't pass his mother's test. Lu Xiaoyi came to the door of a grocery store. He jumped off his horse and ordered Ping'an wait outside. Ping'an felt that his little husband was a little mysterious, but his responsibility was to not let his little husband out of his sight. The grocery store wasn't big, and he could see through it at a glance from outside, so he wasn't afraid of anything. Serving a master required a discerning eye. He could not listen to the old madam, but he also couldn't go against his little master. After all, his little master was his future. Whether he could eat until he was old or not depended more on his little master's nod in the future. Lu Xiaoyi walked into the store with a smile. The shopkeeper was stunned when he saw him walk in. He looked a little familiar. After thinking for a while, he had a slight impression of him. After thinking for a while, he felt a headache coming on. When he bought those things, he was very clear about the use of those things. Coupled with the recent uproar in the Earth Cliff Cave, it went without saying who this young master in front of him was. Lu Xiaoyi slowly walked in front of him. You were the one who prepared those things for me when I went to the cave the last time. The shopkeeper was sweating profusely. Out of the 8 young masters of the great clans in Pu City, 2 were dead and 2 were lying on the ground. This was a serious matter. The great clans couldn't blame each other. But if people found out that he was the one who prepared the tools for the adventure, how could he, a small merchant, withstand the anger of the great clans? With just a slight move of a finger, his small shop wouldn't be able to survive. Young Master Lu, I'm willing to return your goods. No, I'll return double. The shopkeeper's mind was very clear. He shouldn't be stingy with things that could be solved with money. However, Lu Xiaoyi smiled and shook his head. Who cares about that little bit of money? Besides, business is fair. What has my Lu province ever forced people to buy and sell without paying? What I want to say is that the things you prepared for me are a little inappropriate, right? If it weren't for you taking advantage of the situation, perhaps one of my companions would have survived. Chapter 41. The shopkeeper was sweating even more. Was young Master Lu here to kill him? If word got out that his goods were fake and shoddy, who would come a buy from him? Those families had lost their lives. It would be strange if they didn't kill him. In all honesty, young Master Lu, please don't slander me. I've been selling groceries here for 30 years. I've never sold shoddy goods against my conscience. My whole family depends on this business to make a living. You're digging up my roots. The rope is made of high-quality coarse hemp. The cloth is made of new high-quality cotton. The water bag is also sewn with real cowhide. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. What about the wind lantern? What about the lamp oil inside? The shopkeeper was taken aback. He did not expect that the entire set of exploration equipment was genuine goods. Due to an accident, there was a lack of oil in this wind lantern, so some other things were added. It was only one stop out of 10, but this young master of the Lu family was able to see through it. It was truly inconceivable. Lu Xiaoyi continued. In an enclosed space, a little light is completely different from no light at all. Especially for injured people, it means hope and can see their companions around them. If you're in the dark, think about it, that kind of despair. The shopkeeper's face was pale. He didn't think there was much of a difference. It was just a matter of burning a quarter of an hour less. The lamp oil of the wind lantern was specially made and more expensive than ordinary lamp oil because it had to be considered to play its normal role in a special environment. But how could it have anything to do with human lives? What was this Lu province young master thinking by forcing him like this? Young Master Lu, this is all an accident. It's not intentional, and it's not cheating. There's only one wind lantern left. Before you came to buy it, my grandson lit it to catch crickets and wasted some lamp oil. He was afraid that I would scold him, so he secretly took some dolphin thread incense, which is the same color as the lamp oil, and dripped it in. You have to know that dolphin thread incense is more than 10 times more expensive than lamp oil. Even if I want to cheat, I can't cheat at such a loss, right? A child's unintentional act is not a crime. You can't put this on us. Our small shop's profits are small and can't withstand the torment of big waves. You're a magnanimous person. Lu Xiaoyi stopped him. A child's mistake? Then there's no need to investigate further. But are you sure you added dolphin thread incense and not something else? The shopkeeper swore. It's definitely not a lie. If you don't believe me, I'll get the child here. I can't lie, can I? On the second day after selling the wind lantern, his mother found out that the dolphin thread incense had decreased by a lot. After asking, she found out the truth and gave him a few beatings. I'll get him here now. Lu Xiaoyi pulled him back. Forget it. I'm just asking because I feel that there's something wrong with the smell. Since it's a child's prank, I won't go too far. Only heaven, earth, you and I know about this. I won't spoil your business. How about this? Bring me the remaining dolphin thread incense. I'll see what it is. The shopkeeper was still in a daze, but he still asked his assistant to bring him a bottle of dolphin thread incense. It was an amber-colored liquid in a porcelain bottle. He opened it and took a sniff. There didn't seem to be any strange smell. What's this thing for? It seems to be very expensive. The shopkeeper hadn't recovered from the rapid changes in the mind of this young master from Lu province. Until now, he still didn't quite understand what this young master's real intention was. Therefore, he could only answer mechanically. Dolphin thread incense isn't a product of the Yi Kingdom. It's a new product from the South Sea country. It's only been a few months since it spread to Poo City. So many people don't know much about its functions. This dolphin thread incense isn't actually a fragrance. It's more similar to a mosquito repellent. It's used to remove armpits, keep the skin tight, and maintain moisture. The noble ladies in the southern countries are used to using this dolphin thread incense as a base. They first apply it on their head and face before applying other fragrances and rouges. This way, they can ensure that insects don't fall off and they don't lose moisture. It can also remove the smell of sweat and armpits from long-term activities outside. However, this thing has just spread to Poo City and hasn't spread to the upper class yet, so it's not selling very well. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. So it's used for both medicine and skincare. It's amazing. This small bottle isn't cheap, is it? The shopkeeper laughed dryly. Because it's still in the market stage, we're not selling it at an expensive price. It's only 5 taels of silver per bottle. We're just making some money from advertising. However, if you like it, this small shop will give it to you. I think the old madam in the residence will need it." Lu Xiaoyi smiled. "Am I here to take advantage of you? How about this? I'll take 2 bottles of this and try it out. If it's good, I'll even take care of your business." He turned around and called for Ping and come and pay the bill. On the way back, Ping and kept nagging. He talked about how 10 taels of silver was too expensive and had already exceeded his monthly allowance. Recently, the residence seemed to be a little tight because of his mischief and so on. Lu Xiaoyi ignored him. When they passed by a tea house, he looked at Pingyan, who had been nagging all the way, and thought to himself, "Pingyan, I'll treat you to tea." In the tea house, Pingyan was a little restrained and uneasy. He also knew that this little ancestor was up to no good, but he couldn't refuse. He could only take one step at a time and hope that it wouldn't conflict too much with the old madam's instructions. After a quarter of an hour, the master and servant walked out of the tea house. Lu Xiaoyi was full of smiles, but Pingyan's face was full of worry. In the past few days, Lu Xiaoyi's movements were confusing in Pingyan's eyes. He didn't know what he wanted to do. In any case, the people he looked for were the natives of the Gobi Desert, which was rarely seen in Pu City. They were ordinary people who had settled down in Pu City with their children and grandchildren when they were older. When he thought of the Gobi Desert, Pingyan's heart kept beating like a drum. He had the impulse to inform the old madam, but the conversation with his little husband in the tea house made him hopeful again. After another 3 days, Lu Yaoshi and Aunt Saihuan went to the Jiakhang Temple in the west of the city to worship Buddha. This was one of the old madam's few hobbies, and it was also a common point among the upper-class ladies of Pu City. Generally, they would go there 2 or 3 times a year. If something happened, they would go there more often. This time, they were going to the Jiakhang Temple mainly to ask for a fortune for that unlucky brat. They would donate money for incense and oil to ask for Bodhisattva's blessing. This was a kind of spiritual sustenance. Although Lu Yaoshi wasn't an ignorant woman, she was still different from the men who worked hard outside. Worshipping Buddha, asking for a fortune, offering a fortune, and eating vegetarian food. In addition, the journey wasn't short, so they wouldn't be able to return until nightfall. Just as the 2 old madams' small sedan chair headed to the Jiakhang Temple, 2 figures flashed out of the corner gate. 2 fast horses went straight to the north of the city. Chapter 42. Out of the North City Gate, Pingyan didn't forget to remind him as they galloped. "Young master, we agreed in advance that we can't enter the Gobi. If you don't listen, I'll really report it to mistress." Lu Xiaoyi smiled but didn't say anything. At this time, could he still let him do as he pleased? It was still the same road. The main road went north for about 10 miles before turning northwest. This was also the shortest distance into the Gobi. The past was like smoke. Once a month ago, there were 8 youths galloping on this road. Unfortunately, what awaited them was a tragic ending. Some people would shrink back, some would escape, some would turn pale at the mention of the Gobi, but some would still be fearless. Lu Xiaoyi never thought that there was anything to be afraid of in the Gobi, as long as one was cautious enough. The last time they fell was because he wasn't the one in charge. If he was in charge, there would never have been such a tragic ending. Because they were familiar with the road, they galloped faster than the last time. There was still 2 hours before noon, but they had already entered the Gobi. Ping made a big fuss behind him, but Lu Xiaoyi just ignored him. It wasn't until they were about 10 li into the desert that he heard Pingyan's voice become hoarse that he stopped. He jumped off the horse and stood on a sand dune to observe the terrain. Young master, when we go back, I'll definitely report you for disobeying orders." Ping was out of breath. Lu Xiaoyi laughed. "First, we'll stop here today and not go any further. Second, the day I take the exam is the day you'll be promoted. What else do you have to say?" Pingyan jumped off the horse. "You're blatantly trying to bribe me." Lu Xiaoyi curled his lips. "Then I'll talk to you about ideals and the future. Will you listen?" Looking at the sand dune for a long time, he actually couldn't see anything. For a person who had never lived in the Gobi Desert in his previous life to be able to understand it just based on the descriptions of a few indigenous people, that was just wishful thinking. But there were 2 points he remembered very clearly. The people of the Sand Nation all said that it was most likely to appear in low-lying areas and shady places. He found 2 such places, so he threw a shovel to Ping, and held one for himself. Come on, let's get to work. If you want to be the supervisor, you have to put in some effort. In a low place where the sun could not reach, the 2 began to dig a hole. Ping dug with great trepidation, fearing that another sand snake or sand scorpion would come out. It would be fine if it bit him, but if it bit the young master, he would not be able to do this job anymore. How could a man in his 30s find such an easy job with good benefits and face? Lu Xiaoyi laughed. Ping, what are you afraid of? There's also protection and medicine. Don't think that those snakes and scorpions are stupid. They had already run away when they sensed the commotion. People are afraid of snakes and scorpions, but snakes and scorpions are even more afraid of people. Not long after, a 5 to 6 feet deep sand pit was dug. The sand was good and easy to dig, but they couldn't continue because it could collapse at any time. After digging, Lu Xiaoyi took out a large porcelain bottle from the bag he carried with him. This was a container used by the people of Pu City to hold herbal tea in summer. It was a foot high and half a foot wide. The mouth of the bottle was sealed very well. The people of Pu City would usually fill it with herbal tea and then hang it in the well to soak it. When drinking it, they would take it themselves. Under the scorching sun, it was very enjoyable. After putting away the porcelain bottle, Lu Xiaoyi carefully took out a bottle of tough string incense. He poured more than half of the tough string incense into the bottom of the porcelain bottle and sprinkled the rest evenly around the outside of the bottle. Finally, he climbed into the hole and tied the bottle cap with a rope so that he could put it down at any time to cover something that would follow the smell to the bottom of the bottle. After everything was arranged properly, he changed to another place, about a mile away, and laid another trap. This was Lu Xiaoyi's attempt at cultivation. He realized that if he wanted to cultivate in this world, he couldn't bypass the barrier of spiritual opportunity no matter what. Of course, this included everything related to spiritual opportunity, such as secret cultivation places with rich spiritual energy, spiritual tools, and spiritual objects. To put it bluntly, they were all resources. He was just an ordinary mortal. Where could he find resources? Even the son of the richest man in Pu City had to give up after cultivating for more than a year. It could be seen that there was no comparison between the exchange of wealth and cultivation resources in the mortal world. It was a concept that couldn't be exchanged for money. Was longevity something that could be bought with money? Even the richest Li family couldn't do it, let alone Lu province, which relied on a few villages outside the city, a few shops in the city, and the legacy of Major Lu to survive. No matter how obsessed Lu Xiaoyi was with cultivation, it was impossible for him to set his sights on his own family. After thinking about it, the only spiritual object he had seen in his life was the white sandworm that he had seen in the Earth Cliff Cave. In fact, this object was mentioned in the book Strange Appearances Witnessed in 3,000 Years. It was a special product of the vicinity of Pu City in Jiaoyi country. To be precise, it was a special product of the Gobi Desert. It was clearly stated in the book that it was like a bird's rib. It was tasteless to eat, but it wasn't a pity to throw it away. A chicken rib was already boring enough. Was a bird's rib worth gnawing on? It was referring to the weakness of the spiritual energy that the white sandworm carried. It was the weakest existence among all living creatures that could carry spiritual opportunity. In addition, this object was naturally timid and sensitive. It hid in the sand and soil and was extremely difficult to capture in large quantities. Therefore, it had no value to be used. To a cultivator, the white sandworm was like throwing 2 or 3 grains of rice into an elephant. Not to mention filling the stomach, the gap between one's teeth would not be filled. Before it reached the stomach, it would be consumed. Therefore, Qi refinement warriors who had some ability would not set their sights on it. However, Lu Xiaoyi was not an elephant. He was now a skeleton ant. What the elephant did not fancy, the the skeleton ant would fancy. During the few days that he was trapped in the cave, he accidentally discovered this secret. It was said that the white sandworm was timid and sensitive. It was very difficult to capture it. It was just that he did not find the right method. To any living creature, it had its weaknesses and fatal points. It was just that he did not know. Back then, the white sandworm surrounded Lu Xiaoyi was actually the oil that had accidentally dripped onto the floor when he moved the wind lamp. It seemed that the white sandworms especially liked this stuff. Was it because of the smell or other reasons? This was very easy to understand. Humans also like to smell all kinds of strange smells. Some liked stinky tofu, some liked the smell of athlete's foot, and some were obsessed with the smell of gasoline. If humans were like this, what about worms? However, why was it that only the oil from his wind lamp could attract worms? Why was it that the rest of the broken wind lamps could not? This was the reason why he found trouble with the shopkeeper of the grocery store. Now that he had figured it out, he came here today. As for how to use these white sandworms for cultivation if he really caught them, this was a topic that he needed to study next. If he did not catch a few, how could he study them? He found a shady place, spread out a piece of cloth, and put some food on the table. The weather and place were getting hotter and hotter. Other than water and fruits, he could not eat anything else. He did not dare to drink alcohol. He was only an ordinary horse rider. If he fell off while drunk and broke his neck, that would be a big joke. He would be nailed to the pillar of shame in Pooh City and would never be able to wash away his shame. Until now, Ping'an could roughly guess what his little husband was catching. However, he also knew what he should ask and what he should know. He should pretend to be ignorant. This was the reason why he could climb to where he was now. When it came to his master's matters, especially those strange things, it was best to pretend that he was an idiot. In this kind of situation, no one liked a smart person who wanted to get to the bottom of things. Chapter 43. After he finished eating and drinking, he rested for a while. Then, he leisurely walked to the first deployment spot. He was not in a hurry because he knew that the white sandworms were slow at following the scent. He had spent a long time in the cave, but he only managed to attract 3 of them. And that was when they were dozens of miles deep into the Gobi Desert. They had only entered less than 10 miles into the Gobi Desert, so how many of them could come? To be honest, he had a mental limit of not being able to catch even one. He would just have to go deeper next time. However, when he reached the first spot and looked down from the top of the pit, he was shocked. The porcelain bottle was completely covered with white sandworms. There were at least 100 of them. How long had it been? How did he attract so many of them? He did not have time to think about the reason. He quickly picked up the rope next to him and put the lid on the porcelain bottle. He did not know what was happening inside, but the white sandworms crawling all over the wall reacted quickly when they sensed danger. They burrowed into the sand and disappeared in an instant, leaving only a clean bottle behind. Lu Xiaoyi felt a little numb. To be honest, after seeing the worms crawling over the porcelain bottle, he did not want to go down and move the bottle. What if one of them accidentally escaped from the bottle and ran out? What if the large group of worms hiding in the sand saw someone coming down and swarmed over? Lu Xiaoyi was a little scared when he imagined himself covered in worms. To be honest, whether it was in his previous life or in this life, he was not a brave person. He was just pretending to be brave. He was not scared of blood and had trypophobia. Who knew what would happen in the future? Fortunately, his savior arrived soon enough. Looking at Ping'an, who was following him, Lu Xiaoyi was very kind and firm. Ping'an, go down and bring the bottle up. Ping'an wanted to cry, but had no tears. Of course, he knew that his little master must be catching something strange. Was it a sand snake? Or a sand scorpion? Sand spider? He did not know. The only thing he knew was that it must be something disgusting. It was hiding in the bottle and crawling around. His little master kindly passed him 2 clips. Clamped the lid tightly. Okay, don't peek. Ping'an had no choice. Who asked him to eat the rice of Lu province? He jumped into the pit with fear and trepidation. Then, he carefully clamped the lid of the porcelain bottle with a pair of tongs. Then, he climbed out with Lu Xiaoyi's help. After that, he carefully wrapped a piece of cloth around the seams. Lu Xiaoyi was afraid that the insects inside would escape, but Ping En's heart was pounding. He didn't know what kind of monster was inside. After Ping unloaded the bottle onto the horse's back, he continued to close the second bottle cap. He did the same thing, but from beginning to end, Ping En did not see what was inside. On the way back, Lu Xiaoyi was in high spirits, humming an unknown tune. No matter who he met, he would greet them cordially. Ping En was the exact opposite. It was not because of anything else, but because there were two bottles hanging behind his horse's buttocks. He always felt that something was biting his buttocks. After walking a few steps, he would look back. Walk again, look again. He was already seriously considering the possibility of continuing to work in Lu Province. The problem was, once he boarded his little master's pirate ship, it would not be easy to get off. Young master, I think it's not appropriate for you to bring these two bottles back to the residence. If something escapes, will anyone still live in the residence? Or it could be harmful to the old madam. Lu Xiaoyi glanced at him. Don't use my mother to pressure me. I know what's right and what's wrong. I'm not playing around. You have to understand that. We'll go in through the side door and go directly to my study. Don't let anyone see. They were quite lucky. The two old ladies had not returned yet. If they knew that the result of this incense offering was that the brat had gone to the Gobi Desert again, what would they think? Ping En escaped from his little master's courtyard. He was afraid that his little master, who was getting more and more out of control, would force him to open the bottle. Just thinking about what might crawl out of the bottle gave him goosebumps all over his body. Ordinary people who had not undergone special training would not be able to accept such a scene. He was wrong. Lu Xiaoyi really did not use anyone else to complete the final procedure. That was because he did not have a plan to mature them. Initially, he wanted to catch a few to study their habits and see if he could come up with a better solution. Who knew that he would be able to find hundreds of white sandworms in two bottles in such a short time? If the bottles were left open for another half a day, he was sure that there would be thousands of white sandworms in each bottle. He also understood why the plan went so smoothly. It went so smoothly that he dared not imagine it. That was because when he was trapped in the cave, the puffer string incense was mixed with the lamp oil. Most of it had been diluted, and most of it had been burned. That was why the incense was not strong enough. This time, it was very different. This was the purest puffer string incense without any impurities. Also, because he did not know the amount, he poured a little too much. A total of 10 taels of silver was poured into the sand pit. If there was a next time, he would definitely not do this. He would pour less or dilute it with other liquids. The white sandworms were caught too easily, and Lu Xiaoyi's rhythm was disrupted. He originally wanted to study and experiment at the same time. For example, how could he extract the spiritual energy from the white sandworms and use it on himself? He could not possibly eat them, right? Eat them raw? Yes, he could definitely retain the spiritual energy, but that was too disgusting. He could not swallow them raw because he was worried that those little things would turn his stomach upside down. However, if he wanted to chew them in his mouth and circulate his qi, even if he was an old soul who had experienced time travel, he could not do it. Eat them cooked. Should he steam or boil them? Should he fry them? Should he add oil, salt, soy sauce, and vinegar? Or stir-fry them with shredded pork? Should he add garlic? Most importantly, he felt that if he ate them cooked, he would not be able to retain the spiritual energy. That would be meaningless. In the summary of Mount Zhong's cultivation, there was an introduction to the different types of spiritual energy that humans could absorb. The best type was the spiritual vigor that flowed naturally between heaven and earth. As there were no impurities and no attributes, it was very suitable for everyone. The second type was spiritual objects. As spiritual objects were man-made, they had their own direction and preferences. Once you absorbed it, you would automatically inherit the teachings of the person who created the spiritual object. In the future, you would have no choice but to follow this path. You would have no choice but to walk down this path. Lastly, there were spiritual vigor life forms, including animals and plants. These life forms also had their own attributes. For example, The precious fire wrought tan wood had the fire attribute, and the coldly grass had the water attribute. As for animals, needless to say, the higher the level of the animal, the more unique the spiritual vigor attribute it had. Unless you wanted to become a monster, no one would absorb the spiritual energy of a monster. However, in this theoretical system, there were some exceptions. For example, among the animal species, those low-level monsters that did not have spiritual intelligence and only relied on their instincts to collect spiritual vigor. They could not even be considered monsters, but the spiritual energy in their bodies was the purest and had not been modified. These little creatures included the white sandworms. Chapter 44. This was one of the main reasons why Lu Xiaoyi had his eyes on the white sandworm. Other than the fact that the individual spiritual opportunity was extremely weak, everything else was perfect. Since it did not have any intelligence, the spiritual opportunity was just a primitive life form. What Lu Xiaoyi needed to do next was to find a way to transfer this pitiful amount of spiritual opportunity to himself. Since the individual white sandworm was too weak, he had to find a way to graft them in batches. If he did it one by one, he would die of exhaustion sooner or later. There was a lot of preparation work to be done. Most of the porcelain bottles were to be used to distribute the spiritual energy. Otherwise, if he opened them abruptly, these things would scatter and burrow into the ground. If that happened, Lu Province would really be uninhabitable. How would he explain that to his mother? It would be best if he could find a completely enclosed space that would not allow the white sandworm to escape. However, this was difficult to do. These little worms had an extremely strong ability to burrow into the ground. Wooden and mud walls would not be able to stop them at all. Unless he used porcelain to build a room, this was impossible. With a serious scientific attitude, he decided to study the white sandworm's living habits first. Most importantly, what did the barb on its tail look like? Did it hurt when it stung? Were there any side effects? He wanted to find someone to test this out, but after thinking about it, he decided that it would be best for him to test it out himself. Everyone's tolerance was different. If he wanted to cultivate, he would have to pay a certain price. If he had to choose between living for a few more decades and feeling some pain, it was worth it. He moved a porcelain bottle, then an empty one. He wanted to transfer a few of them over. These things could not fly, so it would not be fast for them to crawl in the porcelain bottle. As long as he moved quickly, the white sandworm's escape would not happen again. He was still a little nervous. After all, in his previous life, there had been tragedies of people being stung to death by a small hornet colony. He would not be that unlucky, right? This was how unpredictable a person's cultivation was. If there was another person around, at least they could save him before he fainted. He gritted his teeth and reminded himself that there was no success in this world without taking risks. His right hand was trembling. He did not know if it was because the empty porcelain bottle was too heavy or because he was nervous. His left hand gently and slowly moved the lid of the porcelain bottle that contained the white sandworm. After waiting for a while, he felt that with the size of the white sandworm and its flexible body, it should be able to crawl out. He was a little regretful that he had poured too much of the tough string incense. Were these things ignorant of life and death, gathering together to chew on the tough string incense? He waited for a while, but since they did not come out, he instinctively pushed the cap open a little more. Then, more than 10 white sandworms jumped out with incredible agility. That's right, it's hopping. Perhaps it's not too accurate because they don't have legs. When they hop, they bend their bodies like a spring. Lu Xiaoyi's mistake was that the book described these creatures as having no intelligence. He was misled. It was true that they had no intelligence, but they had their instincts. He had the instinct to yearn for the free air. Under the control of this instinct, it was normal for more than 10 white sandworms to jump out. In fact, what he did not see was that there were more white sandworms jumping out from the porcelain bottle. However, because the opening was too small, most of them bounced back after hitting the porcelain bottle cap. Only these 10 white sandworms that were the luckiest managed to jump out from the gap between the bottle cap and the opening of the bottle. This was Lu Xiaoyi's mistake. It came from his lack of understanding of the creatures that he was unfamiliar with. However, as a person, or rather as a soul, he was not brave, but his reaction was very fast. It was also a kind of instinct. He did not scream, he did not push the porcelain bottle away in a panic, and he did not retreat recklessly. He made the right choice subconsciously, and his left hand immediately repositioned the porcelain bottle cap. This prevented an even greater tragedy from happening. The study room was crawling with white sandworms, but he was punished for his choice. Because he did not dodge in time, more than 10 white sandworms jumped out and started to bend their bodies for the second time. This was a purposeful jump, and it was still driven by their instincts. When they realized that there was great danger, their only countermeasure was to stab the barbs on their tails. They would stab the intruder's body. Facing the white sandworms that were less than an inch long and jumped like little marbles, Lu Xiaoyi did not have much fighting experience and did not have much experience in dealing with them. Everything happened so suddenly that he could not dodge even one of them. On his face, neck, chest, arms, legs, the white sandworms cooperated very well. They attacked instantly, and there was no blind spot. Have you ever imagined being stung by more than 10 wasps at the same time? Lu Xiaoyi was experiencing it now. If he was stung once, a human would scream. If he was stung twice, he would probably scream in pain. When more than 10 wasps of extreme pain hit him at the same time, other than sucking in cold breath from the pain, he could not even scream. It was as if there was no part of his body that did not hurt. There were thousands of places where he was stung, and he did not even know where he was stung. His body was stiff, and he could not make any normal movements. He could only maintain his posture and slowly sit down. This was a natural phenomenon when a normal person came into contact with Spiritium for the first time. There was no one to protect him, help him, or guide him. Thousands of thoughts flashed through his mind at the same time, but Lu Xiaoyi accurately grasped the most important one. He did not regret, feel sad, remember, or think about his last words. He sat on the ground and closed his eyes. No, he could no longer control his eyelids. Middle parallel chief formula. This was a disaster, but it was also an opportunity. It was no longer important how he reached this step. What was important was what he should do when he reached this step. If Ping barged in at this moment, he would definitely not recognize his young master because he was already swollen like a rubber ball. But of course, he would not appear. With those strange things around, he would not enter even if he was beaten to death. This was Lu Xiaoyi's own doing. In order to protect his shameful privacy, the only requirement he had for his servants in the past few months since he had transmigrated was that no one was allowed to barge in without his permission. The white sandworms that shot out their stingers were not much better than Lu Xiaoyi. All the essence in their bodies had been turned into stingers that were nailed into their opponents' bodies. They had become real worms, and they could not even move like normal worms. In the Gobi Desert, this was the most dangerous state they could be in. They would either stab their opponents or become delicious food for the sand snakes, scorpions, and spiders. They could only wait for a period of time and slowly recover their strength. Only then would they be able to drill into the depths of the sandy soil. Then they could rely on their instincts to find insignificant and meaningless spirit veins under the Gobi Desert. Over a long period of time, they would replenish themselves until they could cultivate another barb. Just like that, humans and worms perished together. They slowly recovered in silence. No one knew who would have a last laugh. There was a commotion in the front yard. That was the return of the two madams. After a period of commotion, it returned to silence. They were old and tired after a day's work. Of course, they needed to rest early. No one came to care about the life and death of a certain unlucky person. Chapter 45. In the morning, when the first ray of sunlight shone through the window and landed on Lu Xiaoyi's face, he woke up as if he could feel the warmth. He shook his sleeves and patted his body. Everything was normal. It was as if nothing had happened, and he had only had a realistic nightmare last night. He was not as strong as an ox, as light as a swallow, as strong as a drum, and he was not covered in mud. Even a dying person would not be able to excrete more than a few kilograms of black mud, right? As he complained out of habit, he stood up and looked around. Those real existences told him clearly that everything had happened. The porcelain bottle was still in its original position. The dozen or so half-dead worms on the ground all told him that it was not a dream. He narrowed his eyes. The morning sunlight and the rising dust in the room intertwined to form a beautiful picture. In this picture, there were faint flashes of golden light, like mischievous fairies. This was not an illusion caused by banging his head against the wall and seeing stars. This was also something real. This thing had a very desirable name: spiritual opportunity of the heavens and earth. This was cultivation. Naturally, it was not like reaching the heavens in a single step. As he walked further down this path, this spiritual opportunity would eventually be used by him. It would turn into fire, roast duck with wine. It would turn into ice, sour plum soup on a hot summer's day. Wasn't this a little too useless? He did not care. This process was wonderful and enjoyable. There was no need to suppress himself with these heavy and lofty ideals. He stood there quietly, once again circulating the parallel chi art. The floating golden motes of light in the air slowly and unwillingly surged towards him. This was the true essence of cultivation, the source of all magic, the beginning of another world. This was what he deserved. He stopped daydreaming. He realized that he was not as excited as he thought he would be. It was as if all of this was logical and natural. He crouched down and carefully picked up the dozen or so white sandworms and placed them back into the empty porcelain bottle. He did not have the magnanimity to cherish moths and sand, nor did he have the ideals of equality for all races. Since they were still alive, there was no need to stomp them to death and sweep the floor. He could just put them back the next time he went to the Gobi Desert to catch worms. After taking the first step in cultivation, the biggest feeling he had was he exited the study and turned left. Behind the corridor, there was a small bamboo forest. There was a small room under red bricks and green tiles. He released himself to his heart's content. After holding in for a long time, he felt like he was going to explode. Cultivators were also hungry and needed to eat. Cultivators also had a cycle that needed to be expelled. Why was it that other people's cultivation was so high and mighty, but when it came to him, it was just oil, salt, soy sauce, vinegar, and tea? Chunhua, bring me some breakfast. I'm hungry. Take a few more buns. I want minced meat. Lu Xiaoyi shouted toward the outside. Then, the sound of a young maid running towards the kitchen could be heard. After washing up and finishing his breakfast, Lu Xiaoyi went to pay his respects to his mother as usual. It wasn't a big deal, so he chatted for a bit before returning to his study. In any case, this was the first step. It would be a lie to say that he was not happy. His heart was very eager. He needed to go through everything that had happened last night so that he could determine the next step of the plan. Life required planning, especially the life of cultivation. He noticed that there were no traces of the white sandworm's barbed tail on his body. At that time, he knew very well that his hands and face had been stung. No matter how powerful the medium parallel chi formula was, it was impossible for it to absorb all the hardened barbs, right? He first circulated the medium parallel chi formula a few times, but he felt that the results were very small. It was as though he had made no progress. On one hand, it was because the spiritual opportunity was thin. On the other hand, it was because the timing was wrong. In this world, the effects of cultivation were different at different times. The best timing was between dawn and dusk. Simply put, it was the time when the sun rose and set. This was because the spiritual opportunity was the most active at that time, and it was also the most intimate. It would result in twice the result with half the effort. Of course, if you spent all 24 hours cultivating, no one would bother you. It was just that the efficiency was too low. This referred to the consumption of spiritual opportunity by nature. If one relied on spiritual tools and spiritual items, there would not be so many rules. This included these white sandworms. Lu Xiaoyi was very clear about his current level. He was at the entry level of the Chi Eater stage, which was the lowest level possible. He could barely feel the existence of the spiritual opportunity in the world, but he was still far from being able to manipulate it. He was also far from being able to learn spells. With his level of cultivation, he was afraid that he could not even release a small flame. This point was strictly stipulated in the medium parallel chi formula. Only when the middle dantian was filled with heat and felt bloated would it be the time to start learning spells. Now, eating chi, the word eating was the foundation of cultivation. He still had to rely on the worms. With his first experience, his psychological resistance was much stronger. When he saw the white sandworms again, he felt less disgusted and more affectionate. After all, they were partners that helped him with his cultivation. He had to treat them well. Lu Xiaoyi stripped down to his upper body. He wanted to see what the white sandworm's tail hook was. He gently removed the porcelain bottle cap and kept it open at the same level as last night. 10 or so worms were enough for him. He had just entered the entry level, so he could not run away. He would be wasting his time. Just like yesterday, another dozen or so white sandworms jumped out. Once they landed on the ground, they immediately attacked the person they sensed danger from. The only difference was that the person who was attacked no longer panicked. Instead, he watched the white sandworm's actions with great interest. When he saw the tiny flesh worms approaching him, he arched his body and turned around before a white light shot out from his tail and entered his body. It was almost the same pain and swelling as last night. However, because he was confident, he could endure it. At the same time, he channeled his qigong to move the 10 or so tiny streams of spiritual opportunity that entered his body. After 2 hours, his body had completely returned to normal. At the same time, he had also completely digested the white sandworm's spiritual opportunity. During this process, he had come to 2 conclusions. First of all, the white sandworm's tail hook did not actually exist. It was not a real thing like a wasp. It was just a figment of the imagination of an ordinary person who was stung. It was not a real tail hook. It was a pure spiritual vigor that was shot out from its tail. Secondly, he could not completely absorb the white sandworm's spiritual opportunity. He could only absorb half of it. The rest was slowly spreading out and merging with the heaven and earth. He knew that this was because he was not proficient enough in the parallel chi formula, and it was not attractive enough. One day, when his cultivation level was strong enough, he would be able to absorb all the spiritual opportunity in just one cycle of the chi formula. However, when that day came, he would not be interested in the spiritual opportunity of the white sandworm anymore, right? He had never thought that he would cultivate by being stung by insects in such an unimaginable way. It did not matter if it was a black cat or a white cat. As long as it could catch mice, it was a good cat. Chapter 46. As for how to make use of being stung by the worms to increase his cultivation, he needed to explore the process. How could he optimize it? Was it better to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, or to use the white sandworms? Was there a limit to the number of times he could use the white sandworms? Was there a bottleneck in a single day? How many white sandworms should he release at a time? Based on the increase in his cultivation, the number of white sandworms he released would definitely increase. Then, what was the basis for determining the number of worms he released? These questions needed to be slowly explored in his cultivation and could not be rushed. After solving the problem of his cultivation, he would have a start and finally have a goal in his future life. But now, there was still a thorny problem. How was he going to pass the summer quarter examination? How was he going to let his mother not be disappointed? This was also very important. Although it was meaningless in the long run, it could be everything to an old person. Lu Xiaoyi could not change his mother's mindset, so he could only cater to her. He had a limitless future, but his mother did not. He could not wait until he was successful in his cultivation and became famous before regretting why he did not fulfill his mother's wishes. In the end, he would end up like those so-called filial sons who made their parents angry and disappointed when they were alive. But after they died, they built their tombs into palaces and cried until they wanted to die. This was not filial piety, it was a show for others. In his current situation, it was impossible for him to focus on his studies. Firstly, his soul was not in tune with the cultural attitudes of this world. Secondly, he was worried about his cultivation, so he could not devote himself wholeheartedly to it. For a soul of a loser from his previous life, if he could not pass the exam, he could just cheat. He did not feel pressured by this, and he was not obsessed with cleanliness. Little husband, are you going out again? Does mistress know? Pinga was having a headache now. His little master had changed so much in the past few months. If he hadn't been by his side every day, he would have suspected that it was the same person. The previous 17 years of worry and fear added up was not as much as the past few months. It made a comfortable job full of challenges. If this continued, should he ask for a raise? Lu Xiaoyi glared at him. This fellow had lived a comfortable life for too long and did not have the slightest awareness of taking responsibility for his master. In the city, I don't have to report to anyone about going to Li San's residence, right? Ping, and you have to remember your position. I don't want to hear similar words in the future. Whether or not I ask Mother for instructions, that's my business. It's not something you should care about. The reason why they were going to visit the richest family was something that Qi Er and his gang had occasionally mentioned when they were hanging out. There were also a few scholars among the collateral descendants of the Li family who had passed the scholarly examination. This made Qi Er and his gang have some guesses. They were all very familiar with each other and knew each other's background, so they were very disdainful of those people who could suddenly become scholars. In their opinion, the Li family must have done something behind the scenes, or bribed the examiner, or found a gunman who knew the questions in advance. Lu Xiaoyi had heard of it before, but it had nothing to do with him. Now that things had come to a head, he remembered this story. Of course, it was impossible to bribe the examiner. There were too many variables. If Mother found out one day, she would definitely break his legs. The best thing was to know the questions. He didn't need to find a gunman and could piece it together himself. The greatest ability that the experience of his previous life gave him was to write his own thing through a certain degree of learning from other strengths. He had written countless manuscripts all these years. He was very good at piecing things together. For this kind of thing, he definitely couldn't find a scholar, because it was easy for scholars to cause trouble. Maybe they help you for a while for a favor or for money. But who knows when they would find their conscience in the future and jump out to cause big trouble. The conscience of a scholar was like this. When they were hungry, they were different. When they were full, they were different. It was completely unpredictable. They were not like businessmen. They at least had a principle, equivalent exchange. Moreover, he had saved Li San's life, right? With the Li family stepping in and using the Li family's disciples' ambition as an excuse, they would leak some information to him. There would be no future trouble. They could totally deny it afterwards. Entering and leaving the Li family's residence was very low-key. After all, the rumors had not completely died down. He entered through the side gate, but was personally led by a housekeeper. Along the way, he was very polite and respectful. Li Sanlang stood in front of his courtyard. When he saw Lu Xiaoyi, he waved excitedly and then pulled him in. Lily, don't mind it. Third brother can't take half a step out of this courtyard. Otherwise, this old man won't give you any face. Li San's courtyard was very luxurious. However, this was relative to Lu province. In the Li family's residence, his courtyard was very ordinary. Both parties took a seat in the courtyard. The servants served fragrant tea. Before Li San could speak, Lu Xiaoyi had already taken out a scroll from his sleeve. This is the first time I've come to your residence. I don't have much to take. The Li family is wealthy. My Lu province's family background can't compare. I only have a scroll to express my gratitude. Li Sanlang was very surprised. His Li family was wealthy, that was true. However, Lu province was expensive, but it was also not bad. Scholars admired themselves for being virtuous and had bad tempers. It was already very difficult for Lu Xiaoyi to visit him. Now that Lu Xiaoyi had brought a gift, he was a little flattered. In this world, if a family was expensive, they would definitely become rich. However, the rich might not be expensive. Therefore, although the Li family was the richest family in Pu City, in terms of status, they were still somewhat restrained in real situations. In front of the truly powerful, they were nothing. Therefore, when Lu Province had rejected Lu Sima's handwriting, they had been ashamed for many years. However, they could not show it. When he opened the scroll, Li San couldn't see anything special about it. However, no matter how incompetent he was, he could still see the inscription at the bottom of the scroll. With one look, he immediately knew the value of this scroll. It was not the amount of money, but the meaning it expressed. Xiaoyi, this is Lu Sima's masterpiece. Why did you take it out yourself? Lu Xiaoyi smiled and explained, this is not Xiaoyi's idea. If it were up to me, a table of one Shun restaurant's banquet would be enough. Isn't this playing the lute to a cow for you? This is Mother's idea. She said that since it's your first time visiting, it's not good to come empty-handed. Li Sanlang was very experienced and knew what this meant. This scroll was not something he could accept. He had directly called for his servant and instructed him to deliver it to his master. This was the only way to be considered equal. He knew that after today's incident, the relationship between the Lu and Li families would most likely be reversed. It was good for everyone, so why not? He knew, and so did Lu Xiaoyi. This was his mother's good intentions. This was a strategy where she played the bad cop, and Lu Xiaoyi played the good cop. This allowed him to slowly build his own network. One day, even if she was no longer around, there would still be people to help her son. This was usually a method left for the heir by the emperor. The old emperor suppressed talents, and once the new emperor used them, they would immediately become his confidants. This should be his father's method, which was the closest to being the emperor. His mother was just following the plan. However, regardless of the reason, the deep meaning of his parents made him sigh. Chapter 47. The two of them sat opposite each other and chatted. The topic of conversation could not stray away from the exploration of the mystery. Back then, 2 of the little 6 righteous brothers died, 2 were injured, and 2 left. They had completely fallen apart. When they talked about this, the 2 of them felt a little down. Things had changed with the passage of time, and they felt a sense of loss. Thus, he changed the topic. Xiaoyi, there are only the 2 of us left in Pu City. I won't hide it from you. After the confinement ends and the old master's anger subsides, I'm afraid I won't be able to stay here any longer. I'll have to go out and run around. It's very likely that I'll have to stay in the capital for a long time. This time, my old master is really angry with me. He's angry that I don't know when to stop even though I'm a few years older than you. But I'm also suffering. There's actually another reason why I joined you. Lu Xiaoyi asked, what's the reason? I also feel that we weren't close to each other in the first place. How did we get together just like that? Third brother, what's your motive? Tell me the truth. Li Sanlang was very embarrassed. I'm ashamed to say this, but I was entrusted by someone. I'll tell you about this later. You'll understand very soon. But Xiaoyi, you and I know a little about each other. Did you come to look for me this time, for something? Just tell me. If I'm not in the residence in a few days, you won't be able to find me. Lu Xiaoyi did not stand on ceremony. He had to beat around the bush when talking to scholars, but there was no need to do so with a businessman. Since you owe me a favor, I'll find an excuse to return it. Everyone will be at ease. You also know that there's an examination this summer. Talented people compete. Mother wants me to pass the examination, or else I'll have to marry and have children. I won't be free. At first, it didn't matter. Although I'm not considered outstanding, I didn't study for nothing for the past 10 years. It's probably not difficult to pass the literature examination. But ever since the cave carvings disaster, I've been feeling uneasy and distracted. I'm afraid that I'll lose control of myself. If the young master of Lu Province fails the examination, who knows how many people will gossip about me? Li Sanlang nodded. Little E is right. I just happen to have something to remind you of. As far as I know, those poor and destitute people in Pu City are probably going to join forces and stir up trouble. They're targeting our cave carvings rescue mission this time. They said that they're using the power of the government and using public resources for private purposes. They're planning to submit a petition to the Minister of Education. Among the 8 of us, the rest of us don't care. We don't even take the exam, so we can let them do whatever they want. You're the only one who's different. You're a scholar, and there's going to be an exam this summer. So, Lu Xiaoyi realized something. Is someone deliberately targeting me? Li San laughed. Of course. Who told you to hit my head with a brick and make a fool of yourself? Lu Xiaoyi suddenly realized that it was this guy who was secretly stirring up trouble. This person is still in Pooh City? How dare you collude in private? Li San shook his head. He's smart. At that time, the old mistress of your residence passed down a message to suppress his scholarly achievements for a few years. In the end, this destitute person is also quite capable. I don't know how he managed to hook up with Miss Lin, the county magistrate of Lanwei County. With Lanwei County's recommendation, he's already gone to the prefecture. The ones who stayed here to stir up trouble are his destitute friends. He's actually completely removed himself from this mess. Little E, this person is not to be underestimated. He's very scheming. If you want to deal with him, strike hard and get it done once and for all. Lu Xiaoyi was a little speechless. He didn't know that his mother would do such a thing after the incident. In the eyes of a poor scholar, this was abusing one's power to bully others, colluding with the rich and powerful, and was unpardonably evil. However, from Lu Xiaoyi's perspective, he saw a mother's love and care for her son. Was there even a need to say which side his ass was sitting on? How much of a hypocrite did a son have to be to stand on the side of so-called justice? Li Sanlang continued. Every summer's imperial examination questions are set by the local government. In Pooh City, the prefect and the scholar of Dao discuss it together. Only the two of them know about it. It's sealed in the storehouse and guarded by soldiers day and night. It's impossible for outsiders to know about it. Seeing Lu Xiaoyi looking at him quietly, Li San smiled. Of course, we're not outsiders. If you want to know, we can do so. Little E, you don't have to worry about this matter. Just leave it to me. In the past years, the questions were set 3 days before the examination. I'll need some time to deal with it. I'll send the questions to your residence about 1 to 2 days before the examination. You've never asked me for help, and I've never helped you. Before the examination, I'll send you a banquet to cheer you up. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. Third brother, if you have such convenience, why don't you take the examination yourself? It'll be more convenient for you to go out if you have a Wenzheng with you. Li Sanlang shook his head. Me? Not suitable. Among the upper echelons of Pooh City, there's not a lot of demand for Wenzheng. You know that there are only so many rich and influential families. Which family has a disciple who makes progress every year? Besides, it's just a Wenzheng, not a Wenzheng. It's just a title and can't be taken seriously. Miley family is a businessman, and we value genuine goods at a fair price. We can have our methods, but they're all within limits. For someone like me, who's not good at studying, if you insist on using a Wenzheng as a title, once someone tries to stir up trouble and accuses me of bribing the government, the losses will be greater than the gains, so it's meaningless. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. The Li family knows when to advance and when to retreat. No wonder their business is so big. Actually, it's good to go on the trade route. You'll be free and at ease, and you'll also be a guest of the prefect. If you want to become an official, who knows how many years you'll have to endure before you can step through the doors of the prefect's office. Li San thought about it. He probably felt that this young master from Lu province was indeed very compatible. Moreover, in a short while, he spoke the truth. The prefect won't do such a thing. His family is rich, and he doesn't lack money. He only wants to climb up the social ladder, so he's very strict in this aspect. Lu Xiaoyi laughed. So it's actually, but I see that Lord Xuedao is usually very serious and serious. I didn't expect him to reveal such a thing. Li San said disdainfully. The more serious he looks on the surface, the more dirty and filthy he is in private. Otherwise, why do you think that he, a poor scholar with no family business, would marry 3 or 4 concubines? The servants served wine and food. It was different from what Lu Xiaoyi had imagined. It wasn't wine and meat, but some light snacks. Li San suggested, why don't we find someone who can play music? Lu Xiaoyi laughed. Third brother, in your current situation, how can you find someone who can play music from outside? Will the old master of your family turn a blind eye? He wasn't interested in the music of this world. He didn't appreciate music from the same point. However, everyone liked it, so he couldn't stand out too much. It was just a way to adjust the atmosphere. However, there was no need to do so in a private setting like this. It was also a way to tactfully decline. However, Lee San insisted. If it's not from outside, then it's from within the family. The old master won't say anything. The guest should follow the host's wishes. Since Lee San said so, there was no need to insist. While they were eating and drinking, a graceful figure walked in with a pipa in her arms. Her face was covered with a veil, making her look hazy. Every step she took, she had a seductive charm. Lu Xiaoyi was a meticulous person. He noticed two things that were very unusual. First, Li San revealed a strange expression when he saw this musician. It seemed to be disdainful and helpless. For a normal musician, the most basic etiquette would be to bow to the two of them, and then earnestly request for music before performing. However, this musician didn't care about such etiquette at all. She found a stool and sat down. She tuned the strings and plucked the music. Perhaps this was the style of a rich family. Chapter 48. After the song was played, Li Sanlang cheered loudly, but his words were insincere. Although Lu Xiaoyi's knowledge of music was limited, he had heard a lot these days and had some insights. Although this woman's technique was skilled, she was far from being a master. She was far inferior to those musicians in Chow Phone Brothel. How did she enter the Li residence and become a concubine? He looked at Li San curiously. Li San was a little embarrassed and said, "Second sister, you say it yourself? I can't do this. In order to bring Master Lu to the Li residence, I almost lost my life in the Gobi Desert. Isn't this a great favor to you?" The musician, who should be Li San's second sister, walked over gracefully. She opened her red lips and spoke in a hoarse voice, a typical smoker's voice. "Master Lu, this is the second time we meet, right? At the Spring Rain Pavilion at Xiaoya Lake. You even answered two of my questions." Lu Xiaoyi suddenly understood. To be honest, at the Spring Rain Pavilion, he didn't have the chance to see the faces of the three women behind the table. He wasn't in the mood to see them either. However, he vaguely felt that one of them had a voice similar to the woman in front of him. It wasn't that he was sensitive to women's voices, but this woman's voice was too special. He hurriedly stood up, so it was second sister who played the song. "Little E, how fortunate. Third brother hid it from me and caused me to be impolite. You should punish me with a cup of wine." The woman walked over gracefully and sat down on an embroidered stool a few feet away from the table. The fragrance of her fragrance was intoxicating. Although the women in this world couldn't drink with the guests at the same table as in his previous world, they could still sit and chat. "Master Lu, what do you think of my song?" Lu Xiaoyi laughed in his heart. He had already guessed the woman's intention. She asked two questions at the Spring Festival and sent her brother to rope him in. What was the reason? It was just an old cow wanting to eat young grass. What was so difficult to guess? He had heard Chi-Er and the others chatting about this before, saying that the richest Li family had a rebellious daughter. She did things in an eccentric manner and was different from the rest. She had married twice and caused the death of two children. Now, she might as well stay in her parents' home and be very carefree. Originally, this kind of personality was very difficult to tolerate among everyone, but the Li family was rich. Most importantly, this daughter of the Li family was very favored by the old man. She was the only girl in Li San's generation, so she might be a little arrogant because of the favor. The problem was, he didn't refuse. He couldn't go to the turbid brothel because it would tarnish the reputation of Lu province. He didn't want to marry a wife because he was afraid of being restricted. Now that there was such a woman who had delivered herself to his doorstep, why not flirt with her? He didn't need to spend any money, and he might even be able to pay for it. He didn't need to worry about his friends remarrying. It was better than those young girls who were like bean sprouts, right? He had experience in dealing with such women who felt that they were different from the rest. She's average. She's even worse than the singers outside. Li San, who was next to him, kept glancing at him, but he acted as if he didn't see it. For a strange woman like second sister, you don't need to take music seriously. You don't need to please anyone. Why bother? Second sisterly smiled like a flower and pointed at Lee San with her slender fingers. You see, young Master Lu is an honest man. What he says is honest. But you always praise my music skills. Do you think I'm stupid? Lee San Lang secretly cursed his bad luck. He realized that he might have made a mistake as the middleman this time. The four brothers had been secretly competing for a long time. In the end, who would be the head of the family and lead the whole family's business? It was hard to explain in a few words. This was also a common problem in a merchant's family. In this world, splitting up the family's business was not popular. Merchants all felt that splitting up the family's power and strength meant that it was a disaster that would eventually lead to decline. Therefore, they all had one son in charge, and each had their own focus. His four sons were all adults. Although the competition hadn't reached its climax yet, it was beginning to show signs. Not only in business, but also in the internal affairs of the family. Each of them had their own tricks up their sleeves. Some started from their mother's side, some started from their maternal relatives, some worked hard, and some had honey in their mouths. Lee San's backer was his second sister. She was one of the few people in the family who could act spoiled and unreasonable in front of the old man. This time, the big incident in the Gobi Desert happened. Although part of the reason was to act as a pimp for second sister, after the incident, second sister did her best to help him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the opportunity to go to the capital to take care of business. Originally, he thought that second sister was just curious and wanted to see something new. Because of the scene at the spring festival. Others might not know, but how could he not know? His second sister was a bit shrewish and did things a bit erratically, but she was not a fickle person. In his opinion, the young master of Lu province must have high standards. He would not marry anyone who was not from a prestigious family. He would not accept anyone who was not from a wealthy family. It was impossible for him to fall in love with second sister, whom he had already married twice before marriage. With the status of Lu province, even if he wanted to be a concubine, it was impossible for him to marry someone who had already married twice and caused the death of her husband's family. Therefore, it was most likely that they would meet and be friends. At the right occasion, they would support each other. What else could it be? But with this meeting, as astute as he was, he could see that Lu Xiaoyi was not a well-behaved person. Looking at this situation, it was likely that they would create a pair of lovers to relieve each other's emptiness. This pair of adulterous man and woman. Both the guests and the host enjoyed themselves and left. Second sister, Li returned to her residence. Li San walked Lu Xiaoyi to the door of his courtyard, but unexpectedly, an old man who looked like a housekeeper hurried over. Lu Xiaoyi did not recognize him, but Li San was very familiar with him. He was the old master's trusted aide, and even Li San had to give him a few glances. The old man handed over a roll of paper that was tied up with a ribbon. Lu Xiaoyi understood that he was not allowed to read it here. How can I accept this? It is already an honor to be received by Brother Li San. How can I accept gifts from an elder? The old man smiled and said, Young Master Lu, there is no need to be so polite. This is a matter between the Lu and Li families. Young Master can go back and hand it over to Madam. Young Master and San Lang will hand it over to you. It has nothing to do with anything else. Lu Xiaoyi could only accept it. With a slight pinch, he knew that it was also a piece of paper. Presumably, it was also an elegant item like calligraphy and painting. He dismissed it with a smile. Seeing the old man leave, Li San said, Xiaoyi, you. Lu Xiaoyi knew what he wanted to say and stopped him. You don't have to say anything. I know everything. The most important thing in a person's life is to be happy. Just like today, second sister is happy, your friends are happy, and the old master is happy. Why aren't you happy? Why should you restrict yourself because of the so-called etiquette? Why should you make your friends and family unhappy? Second sister doesn't have much time left. She will get married sooner or later. Before that, why don't you leave him with a happy memory? After he finished speaking, he turned around and left. After taking a few steps, he turned back. Also, you have to pay more attention to my matters. If you don't do it well, I won't be happy. If I'm not happy, you can forget about being happy. Inviting a wolf into the house. This was Lee Sam Lang's most direct feeling. Forget it. In any case, he would be leaving Pooh City soon. As for the matter between these two adulterous men and women, what did it have to do with him? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.